are eminent. Yet these dreams are easily accounted for once you experience astral projection. Let us see what Walsh has to say concerning the dream of falling, and notice how it compares with what we have already learned of astral projection. I quote Dr. Walsh. Dreams of falling are far from pleasurable. Generally, they cause a shock which awakens the dreamer. Repercussion. Superstition has it that if the dreamer falls to the bottom of the precipice or whatnot, death will occur. This is fiction, surely, the only point in its favor being that we cannot awaken a person found dead in bed and ask him if he has had a dream of falling. On the other hand, the superstitions cannot prove their belief. It is, of course, possible that hysterical or nervous persons may have such vivid dreams of falling that functional paralysis or weakness results. The dream of falling may be associated with one of flying, coming after the latter, or it may occur independently. For example, a person may dream of flying pleasurably and then may suddenly fall, or he may dream of falling from a mountaintop or other high place without any previous dream of flying. In dreams of falling, we awaken always before we touch bottom. This is because we are on the road to awakening at the time of the dream and awake before its completion, or because the emotions excited by the dream are sufficiently strong to cause the awakening. There are many possible explanations of the falling dream. The usual explanation given is that it's related to the dream of flying, the difference being that in the former, respiration becomes more impeded or slower, and the numbness of the skin increases. Some interference with health may at times produce these changes. Probably it is meant at times produce these changes. Jewell, quoted by Ellis, states that certain observers peculiarly liable to dreams of falling and flying ascribe these distinctly to faulty circulation and say their physicians, to regulate the heart's action, have given them medicines which always relieve them and prevent such dreams. Occasional dreams of falling are not to be considered of great import, however. In not a few instances, the dream of falling occurs just as one is going to sleep. As before stated, sleep comes on gradually, the muscles slow relaxing, and the senses becoming dulled. Many people, on going to sleep, experience the feeling of sliding down a hole or an incline, and sometimes awaken startled. These persons are of a nervous type, though fatigue or slight deviation from good health may predispose to the sensation. It is possible, by paying attention to the sensations which are psychologically present in the hypnagogic state, to know the relaxation of the muscles and the sinking or sliding sensation accompanying it. Such attention is not advisable, however, when one is inclined to be impressionable and nervous. Continuing quotes. The use of a warm, hard bed often prevents the sinking sensation in the hypnagogic state and may thus prevent certain falling dreams. If the bed sags, it may add to the sensation of sinking as sleep is about to come on, or it may cause the sensation with a dream of falling when one changes posture in sleep. Persons troubled by disturbing dreams may occasionally find a remedy by obviating noisy window shutters, creaking bed springs, etc. Continuing quotes. The sensation which we feel when awake of being drawn to the edge of some high building we may be on, or the giddiness experienced on ascending a high place rapidly, may have some role in explaining falling dreams. The chief explanation for these sensations in the waking state is a fall of blood pressure. In a dream, one may reenact a scene from actual life, especially if he has actually experienced the feeling of falling very distinctly. A fall of blood pressure occurs not infrequently during sleep, occasioned by slight physical disturbances. This fact may also explain some falling dreams. Ending of quotes. In the foregoing, Dr. Walsh has given an ideal description of the falling dream and advanced some plausible explanations for its occurrence, and some of these causes, no doubt, do incite dreams of falling. Yet, I can say with certainty that the usual cause of the falling dream is interiorization of the projected phantom. The double may be exteriorized several feet from the body. Negative factors sit in. The astral body will be pulled from upright from the upright position into the horizontal, through the air to a position over the physical, then drop right down into it. The sensation of floating is caught often when the phantom is lying horizontal above the physical, and the first flash of consciousness comes. A dream of flying or of floating will then begin. The emotions are aroused, more negative factors, a speedy descent will occur. The dream then changes to that awful sensation of falling. As the phantom recoincides with vigor, repercusses, the shock is imparted in the physical body. This illustrates how projection will incite sensation akin to the action which is taking place, impress a dream, stir up the emotions, and interiorize the phantom. The dream itself may appear to the subject to have taken a longer interval of time than it would take the phantom to interiorize, but such is not the case. A dream consuming a seemingly long period of time may take place in a very short interval. If you have ever experienced the falling dream, you know exactly what it feels like to interiorize with speed. Even when fully conscious, repercussion of the astral body will give the identical sensation which it does when not fully conscious. For a long time prior to my first conscious projection, I experienced almost nightly falling dreams, dreams of floating and vigorous repercussions. One can be but a few inches out of coincidence and experience a falling dream during the descent. Although I do not entirely agree with Dr. Walsh, he has given an ideal description of the dream, so let us take some of his excellent material in single sentences and apply them to astral phenomena. Statements thus taken will be designated by W. W. Quote, "Dreams of falling are far from pleasurable." End of quote. It is for this very reason that intense emotion stimulates and repercusses the body more vigorously. W. Quote, "Generally, they cause a shock that awakens the sleeper." End of quote. That is, quote-unquote, repercussion of the astral body. W. Quote, "A dream of falling may be associated with one of flying, coming after the latter." End of quote. When a dream of flying precedes a dream of falling, as it usually does, the floating or flying sensation is first noted because the astral body is actually floating above and to one side or the other of the physical. It is floating thus as the first gleam of consciousness dawns. The sensation arouses the emotions. The cable and the physical body are likewise affected and begin to draw the phantom back to a position directly over the physical, hence the sensation of flying. Next, the astral drops downward into the physical, giving the sensation of falling. When it coincides, it repercusses or shocks the physical. W. Quote, "A person may dream of falling from a mountaintop or other high place without any previous dream of flying." End of quote. When this occurs, the first flash of consciousness comes when the astral body is lying directly above the physical. It merely drops downward, or I should say is pulled rapidly downward by cable pressure. W. Quote, "In dreams of falling, we awaken always before we touch bottom." This is because we are on the road to awakening at the time of the dream and awake before its completion, or because the emotions excited by the dream are sufficiently strong to cause awakening. End of quote. Most authorities agree that the subject always awakens before hitting bottom in a falling dream. This is not true. I have hit bottom many times in such dreams, and I have inquired extensively for the testimony of others upon this question. Most of those of whom I inquired, like myself, do hit bottom exactly on time with the repercussion. That is, hitting bottom in the dream and hitting the physical body occurs simultaneously. One can hit bottom in the falling dream, experience only a slight repercussion, drift back into sleep, and go on dreaming that he is badly injured, even smashed into bits from the fall. W. Quote, "Certain observers, peculiarly liable to dreams of falling or flying, ascribe these distinctly to faulty circulation and say they are physicians to regulate the heart's action. have given them medicines which relieved them and prevented such dreams." End of quote. Another score for astral projection. Giving medicine to regulate the heart's action prevented the dream of falling because it prevented astral separation. One may take strychnine and positively prevent the projection because by regulating the heart's action, unusual passivity of the physical is prevented. We shall see later how slowing down the speed of the heart promotes projection. Unusual physical passivity is always governed by the heart. W. Quote, "These persons, subject to falling sensations, are usually of a nervous type, though fatigue and slight deviation from good health may predispose to the sensation." End of quote. Fatigue, nervousness, etc. always promote astral body separation. Almost before sleep intervenes, the astral has moved slightly out of the physical in order to charge with cosmic energy. One may be in a hypnagogic state and several inches out of coincidence. Again, the doctor says, the sensation which we feel when awake of being drawn to the edge of a high building we may be on, or the giddiness experienced on ascending a high place rapidly, may have some role in explaining falling dreams. This is very true, I know from experience. Despite my criticisms, however, I have found Dr. Walsh's book, The Psychology of Dreams, to be a highly informative and interesting work, and I would advise the reader to procure it if interested in dream phenomena. How I discovered the cause of many falling dreams. When a small child, I was in the habit of going almost daily to play with a friend of mine about my own age who lived nearby. He lived in a very large house, a square frame building, and usually high, for it was built on the top of a mound. On the roof, which was flat, there was a railed-in porch, which was accessible by means of a flight of stairs in the attic. Many times we had tried to go on to the top, to the roof porch, but each time my friend's mother foiled our plans. Then came a day when this sentry was off duty. We were playing soldiers and went to the roof porch, which we called Lookout Mountain, to watch for the enemy. For some time I stayed near the center of the porch, but after a while I crawled on my hands and knees over to the edge, and pushing my head through the upright pieces which held the railing, I looked downward. I grew dizzy and seemed impelled to jump or fall to the ground. Had not the railing been there, I believe I should have done so, but in a moment I became frightened, and crawling back toward the center of the porch, made an immediate exit and came down through the house and outdoors once more. I was always afraid to go on to the high porch after that. Even to think of it now makes me feel unsteady. About a year later, I began to be troubled with falling dreams, and every dream was identical. I would dream that I was floating directly over my friend's home, always directly over the spot where I had crawled from the center to the edge of the porch. And in the dream, the instant I reached the edge, exactly where I had looked down that day when I played soldiers, I would begin to fall. The instant I bumped the earth, I would awaken in a jump. Always in this dream, I was full grown and a uniformed soldier. I had experienced several conscious projections then, when one night the dream reoccurred. I was floating over the house where my friend lived. And this was about 7 years after we had played soldiers on the Lookout Mountain. But the floating did not seem to startle me so much this time. Finally, I stopped directly over the spot where the falling always began. I was not falling this time. I was lying still in the very air at the edge of the roof. I was becoming conscious slowly. When conscious enough to understand, I found that I was projected in the astral body and was lying in the air directly above the physical body, approximately 3 feet over it. It will not be out of place to add here that one can move downward in the dream a great distance apparently, but in reality the drop of the astral is but a very small part of that distance. You will notice that the astral body was not actually in the place where I thought it was in the dream, but that it was conducting an activity which resembled the action taking place in the dream. It was a sensation derived from the action of the astral body, which was in some way connected with the subconscious impression I had received that day when, as a child, I had peeped over the edge of the roof and which brought about the dream. It was then that I understood the significance of falling dreams. During that part of the dream when I was flying over the house, the astral body was above and to the side or other of the physical. A scintilla of consciousness had come, and as I was actually floating, the sensation of floating came with this flash. The emotions were aroused. The cable began to pull, the phantom to move through the air, to fly to a position directly above the physical. Here I was dreaming that I was on the very edge of the roof porch. As the phantom lowered, the dream would be of falling. As the body repercussed, consciousness would return, and this explains the phenomenon of falling dreams. So to go back to where we started, astral body activity can incite a dream of floating, flying, falling, and the dream can stir up the emotions. The emotions will activate the physical and cause cable pull, interiorizing the phantom, and the whole interiorizing may be said to come from one fundamental cause: emotion, action, sensations, dreams, sounds. All are contributory factors to this emotion. Emotion itself can be, one might say, positive and negative. If the sensation be pleasant, the emotion will be affected likewise. This may be said to be positive to exteriorization. But if the sensation be not pleasant, the emotion will be negative. Usually what causes negative emotion while the phantom is floating is the quote-unquote process of awakening. If the subject were to experience a dream of floating, while the astral body really was floating, and this dream was of something pleasing, something he enjoyed, say, of being an aviator, the sensation would cause a pleasant emotion, and consciousness would not be so apt to intervene. In such a state, the subject would have a pleasant flying dream, and the astral would be induced to move out rather than in. This would be an emotion positive to exteriorization. Flying dreams are often recalled as pleasurable. I have a close friend who experiences very pleasant flying dreams. The flying, he says, is so real that he, when physically awake, can almost feel himself leaving the ground. He states that in these dreams he always seems to be several feet from the earth, moving over the heads of others. The common explanation given by psychologists for flying dreams is that they are caused by the rising and falling of the chest. But Ellison and others point out that such dreams cannot be accounted for by respiratory action alone, maintaining that one would have to lose the sense of contact with that on which one reclined. Nervousness is a noted symptom. Walsh says epileptics sometimes have the sensation of lightness and of rising into the air. A patient asserted that just prior to a convulsion, she felt as if she rose right into the heaven. The sensation of rising also occurs to some dying persons, leading to the idea that they are being carried to heaven. One individual's dying words, "Don't let them take me, keep me down," were probably occasioned by this sensation. Theories can be advanced till doomsday to account for falling, floating, rising, and flying dreams. One investigator suggests that the falling sensation is a relic of prehistoric days and represents experiences and memories carried over from our monkeyhood state. This explanation takes the prize as being the most preposterous I have ever heard. Another prevalent belief is that the falling of the falling dream merely symbolizes a fallen woman, a fallen soul, etc. The underlying cause of most aviation-type dreams is found in astral body phenomena. The particular movement which the astral body is undergoing when the dream is being impressed determines the type of aviation sensation that is felt. If you will keep in mind the route the phantom takes in exteriorizing, it will be much easier to grasp the relation of astral projection to the aviation-type dream. Remember that the astral body moves upward into the horizontal position, then either uprights above the physical or moves off to one side or other for some distance before uprighting. This latter operation is not uncommon, and it is still more common for the astral to move upward in the horizontal for some distance, say 4 feet, then move off several feet to one side, still horizontal or parallel to the earth, and lie there for some time and then return. This is as far as many projections progress, and it is in this type of experience that many aviation dreams are instigated. Still another activity is this. The astral moves to a given height while lying horizontal, then moves off several feet to one side, slowly then reverses again and moves back to a position directly above the physical, then out again, all the while lying parallel to the earth. If you could observe the countless astral body activities or astral projections, you would be impressed by one outstanding feature while the phantom is within cord activity range. This feature is repetition of movements. It has always impressed me as being very like a mother allowing her child to go to some distant place. The mother, subconscious, allows the child, astral body, to go a short distance away from her, then brings him back. The child is allowed to go further and further, coming back each time. Eventually, the child is allowed to go to such a distance that his mother can no longer call him back, outside cord activity range, and the child can do as he pleases. However, after a while, his mother will come after him and bring him home again. But the subconscious, like most mothers, sometimes permits the child to go away from home without repeatedly calling him back. Fear causes many falling dreams. One can be lying horizontal in the air and have a dream not of being in the air but just an ordinary dream, wherein he is frightened, although he may not remember the dream. The emotion which the dream arouses becomes so intense that interiorization of the dream body begins, hence the falling dream. One member of my family only a short time ago had such an experience. She had first dreamt that the house was being robbed. One of the burglars was going to shoot her. She became so terrified that the emotion speeded her dream body back into coincidence, and she experienced a falling dream as this action took place. It is not unusual for one to experience a falling dream after going to sleep, having had a bad fright during the day. For a terrifying incident, whatever it may be, comes to the surface of the mind during sleep and excites the emotions. Types of falls or interiorizations. There are 3 distinct ways in which the astral body interiorizes, whether the subject be conscious, unconscious, or partially conscious. In other words, 3 falls. These are 1. The spiral fall, 2. The straight fall, 3. The slow vibratory fall. Sometimes the astral comes in from the side, but this is not a fall. Of this more later. See the dream of being drawn toward a phantasmal object. We experience the first 2 of these falls in our falling dreams. The third one we undergo every night during sleep, and it's the normal method of interiorization. The straight fall results in a violent repercussion, for the astral body drops straight down into the physical mechanism. In the spiral drop, the astral body falls with a spiral motion, and while there is repercussion, it's not of the more violent type such as accompanies the straight drop. However, the sensation of the actual spiral drop is very unpleasant, much more so than the straight drop. At all other times, except when the body is drawn in from the side, The double descends into the physical mechanism slowly, the entire organism vibrating upward and downward as it coincides with ease. This is the normal, perfectly controlled interiorization. The causes of the different falls. What causes these different falls? This question came to my mind many years ago, and through sheer experience I discovered that the conscious will can cause the astral body to become more subject to gravitation if exercised in that direction, and less subject to gravitation if so willed. I noticed also that the subconscious will can cause the astral body to move quite independently of the conscious will. I also observed that emotion will usually cause the controlling intelligence to make the astral body more subject to gravity. Thus, within cord activity range, emotion has a double effect. First, emotion brings about greater vital activity of the physical body through the cable, causing the astral body to be drawn back toward the physical. Second, emotion usually causes the astral body to be more subject to the law of gravitation. When the astral cable begins to draw down the floating astral body, if the latter, through subconscious will, spontaneously or incited by emotion in a dream, be suddenly thrown into a condition where it's pulled by gravity also, a straight drop results with a violent repercussion. In the spiral drop, we have one force working against the other, instead of both of them working together, as in the straight drop. That is, in the spiral drop, the cable is pulling in the phantom, but the astral body is in a condition in which it tends to resist gravity. So instead of dropping straight down into the physical mechanism, the body begins to whirl as the cable pulls it downward. You can get a fair idea of this by imagining a boy pulling in his kite. The kite represents the astral body and the string represents the astral cord. When the boy pulls the string, the kite, resisting gravity, begins to whirl with a spiral motion as it comes downward. In the spiral drop, the emotion as a rule will cause the astral body to be pulled by gravity a moment before it hits the physical, but the repercussion has been offset to a great extent by the preceding spiral. In the spiral drop, the head of the subject often seems to be spinning more pronouncedly than the body. This is merely because the pull of the astral cable comes on the head. At the other times, the pull on the head becomes so intense that the body will lose its spiral course and begin to zigzag instead. In the slow vibratory drop, there is a balance of factors, and the controlling power has everything perfectly under control. It is this balance of forces which causes the slight trembling of the phantom in an upward and downward direction. For it is almost as inclined to move upward as downward. The balance is so delicate. It is obvious that in the first two drops, something has upset the perfect control of the guiding intelligence, that is, emotion or fear in a dream. It will not be out of place to mention here that exteriorization is of three kinds also. That is, there is the straight rise, the spiral rise, and the normal slow vibratory rise. Where there is a straight rise, we have a steady push in the cable, while the body is not affected by gravitation. In the spiral rise, we have the push in the cable, while the body is affected by gravity. In the slow vibratory rise, we have a balance, and the rise is under perfect control. In the spiral drop or rise, the subject can frequently hear a swishing sound, as if wings were fanning the air around him, or as if his body resisted the air as it whirled through it. How to break the repercussion in a falling dream. After we experience a falling dream repeatedly on its recurrence, we know while falling that it's a falling dream, and we dread to hit bottom. Now, I discovered long ago that one can break a falling dream merely by letting himself go. It is a curious fact, but nevertheless true, that several others to whom I told the secret recalled it while falling and let themselves go. Every one of them testified that the repercussion was then almost insignificant. Do not fear hitting the bottom. Just let yourself fall, and the repercussion, if any, will be slight. Fear speeds up the fall. Types of flying dreams. There are several variations of the flying dream, almost as many as there are positions for the astral body to assume and movements for it to make as it oscillates in the air over the physical body or on the surface of the ground. Remember, projection dreams are almost invariably true action dreams. If you could control your dreams, you could control the movements of the dream body. Of this, more later. One variation of the flying dream is the swimming dream, with or without motion of the legs and arms. This always occurs while the astral body is whirling along, lying in a horizontal position in the air. Another variation is that in which the dreamer is standing upright and is moving at great speed over the surface of the earth or along a street, etc. One is actually doing this in the dream body during many such dreams, that is, moving at the intermediate speed. I have awakened in this dream several times to find myself doing this in reality in the astral. Usually this dream is pleasant. Again, there is the giant stride dream, in which the dreamer seems to be moving over the surface of the earth in giant strides, very gracefully, almost gliding along, ludicrously at times. This is another true action dream. At such a time, the dreamer is moving in the air in the astral body, and although there is motion of the limbs, he is being moved by the subconscious will. Thus, every step covers a great distance, for it's not the actual step which drives the body forward. This is akin to the steps taken by children whirling on the playground apparatus, the giant stride, the body traveling some distance between each step. Did you ever see a runner shown in slow motion pictures? I know of no better example of the giant stride dream than one sees there. The gliding effect, the gracefulness, the apparent lack of weight, etc., as if the runner were sustained by the air, each step covering a great distance. The flapping dream. A typical inside core activity range dream is the body flapping dream. In it, the dreamer prances round while his body seems to be very lax and flaps upward and downward, much as the body and arms of a horseback rider flap upward and downward when the horse is on the run. In this dream, the body seems very light, and the quote-unquote jumps are often graceful, coming at regular intervals in rapid succession. Often the dreamer will advance along a street or some other path in a like manner. At other times, it seems to be only the head of the dreamer which does the flapping or jerking, and this very pronouncedly. This dream is usually caused by cord activity, the push and pull in the cable causing the dream body to jerk to and fro. With some persons, the dream is as if they were jumping along like a rabbit. Usually the flapping is exaggerated, and it may seem ages between one quote-unquote flap and the next. Head thumping dream. This is a commonly experienced within cord activity range dream. The dreamer always dreams that someone or something is thumping him over the head. The thumping is very pronounced and regular. The ordinary psychoanalyst belonging to the school which maintains that all dreams are the results of prior states of consciousness might tell the subject that this dream had its origin in the fact that at one time the subject had seen a man beating a child over the head, and that this scene had made a deep impression upon him. This would be about as far from the truth as the Adam and Eve story. The head-thumping dream is brought about as a rule by the pronounced pulsations of the heart transmitting through the cable, which makes its point of contact at the back of the head in the dream body. 9 times out of 10, a projector becomes conscious within cord activity range. He feels the pulsations in the astral cable in the medulla oblongata region even before his consciousness is clear enough to tell him what is happening. It will not be out of place to state here that all dreams cannot be accounted for by prior states of consciousness. It should be understood also that I do not contend that all of the dreams which I have mentioned are caused by astral body activities, but that many of them are. For example, a floating dream can often result from gas collected under the diaphragm and crowding the heart, giving rise to the sensation of being in the air. Dream of moving toward a phantasmal object. Very often the dream body will rise out of the physical and move along in the air for some distance, then lower itself until it's on the same level as the physical body, but some distance from it, say 10 feet. The astral body may lie in this position for some time. Then, for some reason, usually because of some incited emotional state, the cable will begin to draw the double toward the physical, which is on the same level as itself. The subject, of course, is dreaming and sees a phantasmal object instead of his physical body. He is therefore being drawn in the dream toward the phantasmal object, such as a Buddha, some hideous person, an animal, etc. In fact, anything which his mind conceives at the time. His physical body is the reality thus symbolized toward which he is being drawn. Often the object seems to be advancing toward the dreamer instead of the latter moving toward the object. This being a repeater dream, on its recurrence the mind pictures the same object. The dreamer is drawn closer and closer until eventually he is swallowed up in the object and usually awakens with a repercussion as he coincides with his physical body at the spot where the phantasmal form was in the dream. The drawing forward may be very gradual or very rapid. This dream is not unlike the falling dream insofar as its causes are concerned, the difference being that in the falling dream, the dream body moves downward, while in this dream, the body comes in from the side. Whenever I have experienced this dream, I have always been drawn towards a monstrous, phantasmal, Buddha-like object, and as I crashed into it, lights would fly in all directions from the center where I struck, and this would be simultaneous with the repercussion. A friend tells me that when she has this type of repeater dream, two monstrous eyes seem to be staring at her, and these eyes advance toward her steadily, growing larger and larger as they approach, until at last she is swallowed up in them and awakens with a start in her physical body. My sister used to be troubled with this dream of being drawn toward a phantasmal object, and in her case the object was a massive bottle lying on its side. She would be drawn toward, then into the neck of the illusory bottle in her dream, and in doing so would awaken with a start, crying out, "The cork's pulling me through the bottle." There are countless variations of this dream, but the action of the dream body really remains the same. It is the cable, of course, which draws the astral body into the physical in the dream. I have inquired extensively concerning this dream and find that most of those who have experienced it have done so about the age of puberty. Whether there be any significance in this, I do not know. Dream delusions. In many dreams, persons and objects appear as they actually are, while in many they appear to be very different. One may see something or someone in his dream, and immediately associated ideas or relative impressions are called up, just as one idea brings forth another while we are awake. The mind then sees something or someone which is only relative to or associated with the real spectacle. While dreaming, you quote-unquote see anything you think about. So when a relative thought is brought into the mind, you see it as substance, though it is a delusion. Thus in the flying dream, one's physical body might be sensed below, and this impression would bring relative impressions, and the body might, through associated ideas, take on the aspect of a crowd or an animal or whatnot, and the subject would then believe that he was flying over a crowd, an animal, etc. In the falling dream, the bed might appear to be the ground or the bottom of a pit, etc., because the mind associates the ground or the bottom of a pit with falling. There are just crude examples of dream delusions. There is a constant association of ideas and impressions taking place in the cryptic chambers of the mind while we sleep. We may not always be aware of them, we may not remember our dreams, but nevertheless there is always the continuous flow of impressions, and it is through association of ideas that many persons and objects appear different to us or become distorted. To the dreamer, a man with a long beard might invoke the impression of a hairy animal. The man in the dream would then turn into an animal. In other words, the dreamer would be under a delusion. The animal might suggest hunting. Hunting might suggest a gun. A gun might suggest being shot by some enemy, etc. If the subject on awakening remembered only that part of the dream in which he was being shot, he would say that he had a dream to that effect. One may be traveling in the astral body dreaming, and on awakening find that many things apparently seen in the dream were but delusions. Also in our dreams we have exaggerations as to time and distance. For example, in the flapping dream, it sometimes seems ages between one flap and the next, while in reality it's but a very short time. And in the falling dream, we often seem to fall a very great distance, while the actual drop of the astral body is not to be compared with this distance. Chapter 5. Effect of instability. I have found that as a rule the subconscious frees the phantom from catalepsy at the end of cord activity range. When motivity is restored to the projected body within this range, it is almost certain that interiorization will come instantly for one who is conscious and an amateur. I will deal what takes place when the phantom is freed from catalepsy within cord activity range. Suppose the astral body is projected and upright at a distance of about 8 feet from the physical. It is within cord activity range, and there are pull and push in the astral cable. Now if the phantom were endowed with its motive powers here, it would act very much like a staggering drunkard, or like a child learning to walk, being thrown from one side to the other. Emotions would be stirred, the phantom would become cataleptic again, pulled into the horizontal over the physical, and drop into it. Of course, a continuance of such happenings would eventually accustom the projector to them. One actually has to learn to walk when he first becomes a projector and is given his powers of motivation within cord activity range. Another undesirable feature of being given motive power within cord activity range is that the individual is seldom able to hold true stability, but becomes stupefied or giddy, thinking that he is standing still and that everything else about him is in motion. However, the subconscious tries and usually succeeds in holding the phantom in catalepsy until it has advanced beyond cord activity range. There are so many individual functions, complex in themselves and working simultaneously during an act of astral projection, that I wonder if I'm not muddling the reader a little. It should be remembered that most of these functions take place within cord activity range, where the phantom is apart from the physical, yet not free from the physical. In reality, a perfect projection could not be considered such if within cord activity range, even though the etheric entity were entirely separated from the material one. The range of cord activity seems to be unknown to many, and in fact, so far as I am aware, no one has ever given an explanation of it or even mentioned it before. And it is my personal opinion that most experimenters in this field do not even know that cord activity exists, believing that the phantom is free the moment it leaves the physical body. It is not so probable that the student attempting astral projection will become liberated from catalepsy or gifted with motivity or be conscious and have perfect sense functioning while inside the range. It seldom happens. The fact that mediums possessing the ability to project consciously have never told of the eccentric working of the cable is weighty evidence that they have never been perfectly normal while within cord activity range. I believe that the subconscious has a definite plan for projecting the astral body, and that if it works correctly as the subconscious intends it to, normalcy will not appear in the phantom until at the end of or outside of cord activity range. There is no fixed time required for the astral to move from coincidence to the end of chord activity range. The temperament of the individual governs this. Some people are of such a makeup, naturally possessing strong positive factors tending toward projection, that they can move out rapidly, sometimes being even unable to stop themselves. Such individuals experience unintentional projections very often when asleep at night being the usual time. Others can move out, but more slowly, through a chance intervention of positive factors or by intentionally inducing these factors. There are still others who, while appearing perfectly conscious, healthy, and even when walking, still have factors set in which are positively favorable to projection. The etheric will begin to shake, reel, and unbind itself from its physical counterpart. The physical will begin to move, twist, tremble. Next, the etheric will become cataleptic, ready to move out. The physical will become so also. Then the etheric separates and the physical falls in a relaxed heap. This is commonly called epilepsy. For the past 8 years, I have been in close contact with this disease, which has baffled medical science, and I have finally made up my mind that what I have described is precisely what occurs at that time of an attack. Usually there is a physical derangement somewhere in the victim, which is the basic cause of the unbinding of the etheric body. Brain lesions and abnormalities of the sexual anatomy are common causes. I know of one case where pressure of gas against the solar plexus throws the patient into the spell. Abnormal mentality always looms up with this disease, and I'm of the opinion, this is not original with me however, that the unbalancement of mind, that is insanity in any form, is caused because the etheric is not bound tightly to the physical. If some panacea could be found, either in medical science, mental science, or any other science, which would accomplish the result of creating a stronger tie between the two counterparts, what a godsend it would be to humanity. When the intermediary between the etheric and physical body is not normal, as in the case of epilepsy, some subjects drift into imbecility. I am acquainted with one woman who became gifted with unusual clairvoyant powers about the same time when she became a victim of epilepsy. Again, some outstanding figures in history have been epileptic, such as Caesar, Napoleon, and Socrates. Just why abnormalities of the mind bring about specific results in specific cases is a matter of which we know little. Eccentricities of the senses. The senses within chord activity range function so capriciously that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to give an entirely satisfactory account of what might and might not happen in the sense field. The best that can be done, at least the best that I can do, is to tell of these curious sense functionings as I have experienced them. First, let us take the sense of sight. When we are in coincidence and conscious, we see only those objects which agree in vibration or are within the range of vibration to which our eyes are attuned, unless we are clairvoyant. When we move out of coincidence and are conscious, the sense of sight does not always restore itself immediately, but when it does, the range of vibration has increased, and we are then able to see not only the material things which we formerly saw, but astral things as well. We call this seeing astrally or astral vision. During close range separation with consciousness, there are several ways in which this seeing may occur. The astral cable is as adaptable to the conduction of sense currents as is the body, and the senses can shift back and forth from one body to the other, or be in both bodies and the cable at the same time within chord activity range. Oftentimes the phantom can be detached within chord activity range, and consciousness will be on duty. The subject will see the phantom from the physical eyes, although they are closed, moving, standing, lying in the air, etc. in the room. I believe I mentioned before that the sleeper will sometimes become conscious and see himself in the astral from his physical eyes, lying about 1 foot above and horizontal to his physical body. This body, which is resting in the air, appears gauzy and seems to be trembling. He may awaken almost immediately after seeing this with a repercussion, and he will insist that he saw all this by means of the physical eyes, for he will say, I saw this from the physical. I saw the astral lying above me, therefore I was conscious in the physical. Footnote: regarding this question of insanity, the anonymous author of The Maniac, That Most Valuable Psychological Document, says in a footnote, the ego can safely withdraw from the physical body, and the etheric body, which is the link between the physical body and the ego, must be shuffled off as one sheath and left together united. Then the physical suffers no harm. The trouble in madness is that a separation has taken place between the two sheaths, the physical and the etheric, which should never be separated during the lifetime of the physical body, and which cannot be separated partially without causing serious physical injury, or completely without causing the death of the physical body. Doctors, having already discovered in anesthetics something that acts directly upon the etheric link and drives it out of the physical body, and should now turn their attention to discovering some means of acting upon the etheric link in the reverse way, to drive it back, or draw it back, or attract it back into the physical body from which it has become dislocated. When they have discovered a means to accomplish that, they will have discovered the means to cure all cases of madness caused by and due such dislocations. H.C. End of footnote. True as it may seem to him, he was not conscious in the physical at all. He was conscious in the astral, the side current moving through the cable to the physical eyes. The physical did not see the astral. It was not the physical eyes which saw the phantom lying above the physical body, for the normal eyes could not see the phantom, and furthermore, the physical eyes were closed. The seat of consciousness is in the astral body, and the current of vision, instead of centering at the astral body's eyes, was cutting one of its peculiar capers and making a circuit across the cable to the physical eyes. By way of illustration, let us take our normal sight while physically conscious. We look out from the eyes, we say, because the current runs from the eye to the conscious mind. Now suppose your eyes and the quote-unquote wires running from them were lifted out of their sockets, placed 1 foot in front of you, and turned toward you. Then you would see yourself instead of looking out from yourself, and that is how the astral vision current occasionally functions across the cable, and the phantom sees itself. And this is but one eccentricity of astral vision. There is another, still more complicated, more mystifying phenomenon than astral vision, however, and that is dual astral vision, which occurs when the projector apparently sees from the physical eyes and at the same time sees from the eyes of the astral body where he really is. When this occurs, it does so very rarely. The subject can watch the astral just as if he were in the physical, observing it as it moves about in the room, and at the same time he is able to see the physical counterpart lying with closed eyes upon the bed as he moves about in the astral body. What would you think if you were actually to experience such an unbelievable happening? What would you think if you could see from two places separated from each other at the same time? Why, it would only be natural for you to believe that you were conscious at these two different places simultaneously, but we have already learned that the conscious mind is not a part of the physical body but operates in the astral body. This dual astral vision is not necessarily dual consciousness, it's a double track sense of sight, one of these tracks running across the line of force to the physical body and the other to the astral body. The first time I experienced this, I thought it was dual consciousness, but I soon discovered that it was merely dual vision. It occurs only within chord activity range, so far as I know, as does the single sense of sight from the physical eye. If dual vision be operative and the phantom moves beyond chord activity range, blink, out goes the vision from the physical eyes. Now, there are authorities who are of the opinion that it's possible to produce dual consciousness or consciousness in the physical and the astral simultaneously. From my own part, I cannot say that this is impossible. I have seen too many mystifying things to deny that such dual consciousness can be produced. However, I do not believe that I have ever experienced it. Now that I understand the dual action of the senses, which I formerly thought was double consciousness. In his book Higher Psychical Development, Hereward Carrington says, the astral body is of course very closely connected with the dream body, with which it is more or less identical. Dr. Van Eden of Holland conducted some extremely interesting experiments upon himself in his dream body. He endeavored to transfer his consciousness to his body so that he remembered everything that transpired during sleep, and to control that body so that through it he would be able to manipulate physical objects in the material world. He did not succeed fully in doing so, but came very near it, and succeeded to the extent that he induced a complete dual consciousness. He remembered clearly that he was asleep in bed with his arms folded across his breast, and at the same time he remembered clearly that he was looking out through the window and saw a dog run up and look at him through the glass and run away again, and details of that character. He then remembered gliding towards the couch on which his physical body was lying down beside it, and a moment later woke up and was again, of course, in the physical body. But he had the extreme sense of duality of consciousness of the two bodies. Here you will see Dr. Van Eden maintains that he was conscious in the two bodies at the same time. I have met with experiences similar to this one recorded by Dr. Van Eden many times, and at first I too believed that my consciousness was in both bodies simultaneously, but after further investigating the mystery, I concluded that it was, as I stated before, a double functioning of vision. I have made the remark, and again make it, that I have seen too many wonders to deny that dual consciousness is possible. So although I do not contradict Dr. Van Eden's claim in the least, I wish to point out the striking similarity between what the doctor believes to be dual consciousness and what I believe to be dual vision. You will notice no doubt that the account which Dr. Van Eden gives could easily be explained as the result of dual vision with a single consciousness and the astral line of force carrying the sense of sight to the position occupied by the physical senses. There is to me something about dual consciousness which seems undesirable, even if it were a possibility. If consciousness can, in fact, multiply itself, if it can be in the physical body in the absence of the spiritual body, then the claims which have been advanced that the consciousness operates through the non-material counterpart alone are fallacious. Now, if during a projection the physical body had a consciousness of its own, then of what use is the inner man? Can both bodies be conscious at the same time while separated? If the cable breaks, will the physical still exist consciously? I think not. It is my own idea, and I have good reason for believing it to be true, that what is supposed to be dual consciousness is in reality an accessory track of astral vision located in the astral line of force and working concurrently with the phantom's eyes. Dropping this matter of dual consciousness for the present, we will go back to our discussion of dual vision, for it is certain that the latter exists within chord activity range on many occasions. We might even say that during a conscious projection within chord activity range, the sense of sight can function in three ways: from the eyes of the phantom, as it should, from the spot occupied by the physical eyes, and from both simultaneously. Footnote: there are times when the projected phantom can see from different parts of its body without using the eyes. Of this, more later, SM. End of footnote. As a rule, one finds that the sense of sight acts from the phantom's eyes alone, But there are the above-mentioned exceptions, and in this work I have not followed the usual procedures, but have gone deeply into the unusual features as well. However, I would advise the reader not to concentrate too long on those things which I have spoken of as the unusual features of projection, lest these crystallize in his mind, and by doing so influence his development, for in the astral as one thinks he is. Duplicate sense of touch. In studying the above account of Dr. Van Eden's, let us consider an interesting feature contained therein. While standing by the window in the dream body or astral body and looking out, the doctor saw a dog run up and look at him through the glass and run away again. Evidently, this dog could see astrally, as he was apparently able to see the astral body of Dr. Van Eden, and there is no reason to believe that animals cannot do so, as well as human beings. The dog, especially, seems equipped with subtle senses. I had often heard that dogs are sensitives. I had a pet dog. In fact, I have him yet, although he's 13 years old. Jack is his name, a mongrel, but always a true friend to me. I wanted to find out if Jack could see me while I was exteriorized in the astral body, so I gave him sleeping quarters in my own room. I knew I could trust Jack not to meddle or to make any noise, and that he would growl if anyone came near the room door at night. There was only one trouble with Jack. He slept too soundly these quarters, and whenever I did succeed in getting out, he was asleep, and my presence did not arouse him. Then a night came when, by accident I suppose, I was consciously exteriorized and Jack was not asleep. He was standing on the floor, looking appealingly at my body on the bed, as if waiting for an invitation to jump up and sleep beside it. From the other side of the room, I tried to get Jack's attention. I moved to a spot where his eyes would be in line with mine, and went through the motions of beckoning and calling him. Still his eyes watched the physical, although once he held his head up and sniffed the air in the direction of the phantom. But this was only for an instant, and he seemed more taken up with watching the shell than in seeing me. I do not believe that he even sensed that I was not in the shell. Finally, something happened which did prove interesting. Jack leaped onto the bed and pushed in closely against the side of the oblivious body and curled up there. And as he did so, a strange thing happened. The physical was rocked upward and downward slightly from the action of the springs, as the dog's weight landed upon the bed, and the astral in exactly the same time rocked upward and downward in the air in perfect harmony with the movement of the physical, although the astral body was in the vertical and the physical was in the horizontal position. But the most amazing part was that as the dog curled up against the physical, it felt to me as if he were actually curling up against my side in the astral, and I could feel his weight against me in the side of my astral body until physically active again. How did this transference of feeling or sense of touch occur? In the same way that one feels anything material, in the same way that it feels when physically active, by sensing it through the currents of feeling. They happen to be in physical, cable, and astral body when projected. In other words, if you feel anything material while in the astral body, you must be within chord activity range, and what you will feel will have to touch the material counterpart. Then it is transmitted over the line force into the astral body, and that is where you really feel it. But this is only an idiosyncrasy of the sense of touch, just as the sense of sight acts in an erratic manner and occurs, so far as I know, only within the range of chord activity. We have seen too that even movement in the physical can duplicate itself in the astral, as it did when the physical rocked up and down from the jar of the dog's weight as he jumped upon the bed. I have long known that at times when within chord activity range, A touch on the material body may be felt in the same spot on the astral member, but it was news to me that the reverse of this is possible also, and that a touch on the astral member can be felt in the physical member. Yet some eminent authorities seem to have established this as true. Thus, in some experiments which I have conducted, I have succeeded in partly dissociating the two organisms by means of hypnotic suggestion, while the subject was in deep trance, and the independent existence of this astral or etheric body has been proved by phenomena of sensibility and motivity. Thus, after the inner body has been to some extent loosened, I have pricked this body with a needle, and though the prick was some inches distant from the surface of the real material body, the subject nevertheless felt the prick as if it were on her real body. I pricked the surface of the etheric body, that is distant some 6 or 8 inches from the material body, but by a phenomenon known to psychical students as repercussion of sensibility, it rebounded or reacted upon the material body in such a way that the subject felt the pricks actually in the body itself. The experiments of others along this line strengthen or corroborate these tests, and Mr. Carrington in his book Higher Psychical Development goes on to say, the French experimenters have conducted many useful experiments on what they call exteriorization of sensibility and motivity, that is, the sensory power and the motive power. If I place my hand over a matchbox in order to move it, I have to touch it. If, however, I'm a medium and I place my hand at a distance of half an inch from the matchbox and then will that the box shall be moved, it really is moved. The theory being that in this case I can project from my fingers an energy which bridges the gap between the fingers and the box and so moves it. That is projection of the motive force. Quote continues, on the other hand, if I prick my finger, I feel it only if my finger be touched. But when the sensibility is projected beyond the body, as it is seemingly in some cases of deep hypnosis and trance, then you can prick a space half an inch from the finger and you will feel it. And that has gone so far in the experiments of Cole de Roches and others that the claim to have taken out the astral body altogether from the physical and set it to one side as it were, and by pricking this body, every prick in the astral body repercussed, as we say, or was felt in the original physical body wherever the prick was made in the astral body. This, of course, bears a striking resemblance to the old witchcraft phenomena in which the witch was supposed to turn into a dog or cat, and if the dog or cat were shot or had an eye put out, the next day the witch was found with an eye out. Repercussion. It is a striking similarity, curious and interesting footnote. A great deal of curious material regarding repercussion may be found in Adolphe de Aster's book Posthumous Humanity, in which an attempt is made to connect such cases with certain phenomena of witchcraft. See also my discussion of the same theme in The Problems of Psychical Research, chapter Witchcraft, Its Facts and Follies, H.C. End of footnote. We have spoken of this before in connection with materialization, you will recall. Although I have long known that at times when the projected phantom is within chord activity range, any touch on the physical member is felt on the same spot of the astral member, the reverse was news to me, and without casting any doubt upon the genuineness of these experiments, I must confess that I cannot understand how a needle can prick the astral body and be felt when that body is intangible and impervious to material things. Remember that the experimenters who discovered this repercussion of sensibility are scientific men and are trustworthy. The fact that I cannot understand how the needle can actually come into contact with the astral body, which is non-material, does not in the least disprove these claims. In trying to solve this problem, several purely theoretic explanations presented themselves to my mind. I noticed in reading these accounts that the subject was under hypnosis and wondered if this repercussion of sensibility was not in some manner brought about because of this condition. I also wondered if a similar occurrence might not be brought about when projection occurred without suggestion or hypnotism. Phantom can pass through needle points without feeling. It was about 2 years ago that I read the first accounts of repercussion of sensibility caused by needle pricks on the astral body, and I constructed a root pricker to test it out. Taking a board which reached from the head to the foot of the bed, I planted several needles in it, points outward, and fastened this to the irons of the bed about 18 inches directly over the place where I slept, so that the needles pointed downward. I succeeded in producing one projection and experienced another which was unintentional during the weeks when I was trying this experiment. Although the separations were not extensive, I did pass through the board without the least tinge of feeling. It is for this reason that I have been speculating upon the belief that repercussion of sensibility as produced by the French experimenters is somehow accounted for by reason of the hypnosis. I readily admit, however, that I may be wrong in this idea. Let us now see how this might be hypnotic delusion of the senses. I quote Professor L.A. Harridan. Delusions of the senses during the hypnotic trance. When this state is complete, hypnotic trance, the mind of the subject remains dormant until aroused to activity by some suggestion conveyed to him by the operator, and to which he responds as automatically as a locomotive obeys the manipulations of its driver. He is indeed, for the time, a mere thinking automaton. He is given up to the domination of any idea that may be made to possess him, and he has no power of judging its consistency with actual facts, because he is unable to bring it into comparison with them. Thus he may be played upon like a musical instrument, thinking, feeling, acting, just as the operator wills that he should think, feel, speak, or act. But this not as has been represented, because his will has been brought into direct subjection to that of the operator, but because his will is in abeyance, and all his mental operations are directed by such suggestions as the operator may choose to impress upon his consciousness. His mind, having lost its power of self-direction, cannot shake off the yoke of any dominant idea, however tyrannical, and must execute its behests. It cannot bring any notion with which it may be possessed to the test of common sense, but must accept it. It cannot recall any fact, even the most familiar, that is beyond its immediate grasp. In another place, Professor Harridan says, "The organs of sense and perception are all channels for the conveyance of any suggestion made to the subject in very many ways. By a look or a movement to the hypnotist is able to convey a suggestion to his subject, which will be quite as potent as if made by means of speech. With a subject in deep hypnotic trance, a needle can be run through the flesh with the suggestion to the subject that it's not felt, and such will be the result. Now, if a needle were stabbed in the space occupied by the astral body, while that body is exteriorized and under hypnosis, why could the subject not be made to feel this prick in the physical? For we have already learned that sense currents can be present in the astral body, in the cable, and in the physical, all at the same time. Thus, even though the pain be imagined, it would be as real to the subject as if it were not imagined, and, through duplicate sensation, would be felt in the physical body. The question in my mind is the subject normally conscious when under the control of an operator, or is he subject to delusions, illusions, and hallucinations of the senses? I think the latter is the case. If the prick of the needle actually did make contact with the sensibility of the astral body, and the subject were normally conscious, he should feel it there. But I wonder if the same repercussion of sensibility would occur if the operator suggested that it would not be felt, as he pricked the space occupied by the astral counterpart. For my own part, I cannot understand how a subject can be himself, while exteriorized, can understand the true significance of what is taking place and still be under hypnotic control. Most of the French experimenters were conducted through the medium of hypnotism, but whether a normal condition of the phantom can be brought about in this manner, I am not prepared to say. All that I have undertaken to say, however, in connection with repercussion of sensibility is nothing more than speculation. In truth, I am no authority on astral projection which is induced by hypnosis. I have never met with repercussion of sensibility from the astral to the physical, caused by the contact of any material object with the astral body, although repercussion of the astral body itself is very common. On the other hand, if the phantom were materialized at the end of the line of force, the needle could prick this temporary material body, and through duplicate sensibility could be felt in the permanent material body. This would be logical consistent, whereas pricking a needle into the non-material form and having it felt when the needle does not make contact with the astral seems to me to be very inconsistent. Suppose this theory to be true, that a needle prick on the exteriorized astral body actually would make contact with the sensibility. Wouldn't an astral entity have to be constantly on the watch, dodging pointed material objects? If he did not, these pointed objects would make contact with his sensibility. There is something wrong with this theory. I believe it is delusion of the senses. However, it would be the height of folly for me to say that repercussion of sensibility, as claimed by the French authorities, is impossible, especially when such notable men proclaim it to be true. There is one thing of which I feel certain, however, in this connection, which is that if repercussion of sensibility takes place, it does so while the phantom is within chord activity range. Let us again recall what chord activity range is. It is a range of near separation, when the astral line of force is active and above its minimum size, when pull and resistance are present, when the senses cut capers and duplicate themselves, when duplicate motivity can be present, when catalepsy is almost always present, when instability of the body is usual, when the breathing and heartbeat can activate the cable, when repercussions of the astral body can take place. In short, it's a state of separation which is not perfectly free and in which abnormalities can exist. It is a state when, although the phantom is separated, it is still bound to the physical counterpart through the medium of the line of force, more or less firmly, according to the individual who is the projector. Duplicate sensibility and obsession. Let us again turn our attention for a few moments to transmission of sensibility from the physical to the astral body through the medium of the cable. It has long been known that many victims of violent death, especially when the death was painful, have returned shortly after to mediums and have complained of still feeling the pain which was present in the physical body at the time of death. Most mediums, believing the astral body to be immune to pain, have, while in communication with such tormented phantoms, told them that they, the phantoms, were dead in a body immune to pain, and that the ego in the astral is suffering from pain which is purely imaginary. These bewildered beings do not merely imagine their agony in the beginning, even though the state of mind does keep them obsessed with the idea long after the cable has snapped. What really happens in such a case is this: the phantom, at the time of death, was exteriorized and within chord activity range, while sensibility was transmitted from the physical body to the astral body, just as I, while exteriorized and within chord activity range, could feel the weight of the dog in my side while in the astral body. This pain, in conjunction with the bemuddlement of such an experience as the victim is passing through, actually drives him mad, obsessed, and the obsession continues long after the cable severs. It is not merely a condition of mind which puts the phantom in this predicament. It is the actual transference of sensation across the line of force, transference of the actual pain, mind you. And in this madness, the victim is often constantly living through, even for months afterwards, the death he experienced. In other words, he continues to experience the death and its painfulness. Let me quote an experience which illustrates this. Mrs. M.E. Hess, a personal friend of the present writers, who is an obsession healer living in La Salle, Illinois, gives this account, which we will call the case of 89. A patient, a lady of about 35 years of age, was brought to Mrs. Hess. The patient believed that she was a locomotive engine and would make all the sounds characteristic of what she thought she was. She would go through the house, chuck, 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 then blow out steam, then whistle, and would follow the track through imaginary towns. On investigation, the healer found that a spirit in the astral was constantly following the woman, and that this spirit was a locomotive engineer. Next, Mrs. Hess got into communication with the obsessor and learned that he was killed in a violent manner under his engine, number 89. This, in fact, was what he called himself, 89, and he was in such bewilderment that he thought he was still under the engine. He could not understand that he was dead and in the astral body. By bringing the engineer's mother onto the scene, who had passed away prior to that time, the obsessor was eventually enlightened and found that his body was not hurting him after all. But it had not been mere imagination in the beginning. 89 was thrown into this insanity in the outset by actually being conscious in the astral body within cord activity range, when duplicate sensation existed and he could feel the engine upon him, accompanied by the pain it brought. You wonder at these astral victims becoming insane, being themselves obsessed, why such an experience as this would drive anyone into a similar state of mind. But fortunately, factors at the time of death are not always as unfortunate as they were in this case. Consciousness does not always manifest at the same time and place. Sensibility does not always circulate in the three organisms at once: the physical body, astral body, and astral cable. Deaths are not always violent and crushing. Yet this case goes to show that there is, after all, a reason why some spirits return and complain of the pangs which they are still experiencing, and which to them are more than imagination. Do not think for 1 minute that this pain in the astral is not genuine. It is real. The sensibility is the same sensibility that it was when the bodies were in coincidence. And although the astral phantom is insensible to physical things, if he does contact the pain by way of the physical through the cable, it is a real pain and stays after the cable snaps and until it is cured by the mind. It is, I realize, hard to conceive of sensibility existing apart from the nerves of the body, but merely because it seems incredible is no reason why it cannot do so. Perhaps this in some manner explains why some persons who have had arms or legs severed claim to be able to feel the arm or the leg after the stump has healed. Might it not be through the sensibility present in the astral occupying the space formerly occupied by the physical arm? In Psychical Phenomena and the War, Hereward Carrington has quoted a sense similar to that of the engineer 89. We will call this the painful bayonet case. On New Year's Day, 1916, 3 friends were sitting for spirit communication when a soldier came to them complaining that the bayonet which killed him was still through his body astral and that it was giving him pain, that he wished to have it removed. After an extensive conversation between the astral entity and the 3 sitters, much was learned as to the phantom: that he was a Canadian, was the husband of Mrs. Weston's cook, whose name was Alice, who lived in Herne Bay near London, and other details. But his main concern was that the bayonet was hurting him. He had been run through by a German on Christmas Day, and he wanted it removed. One of the sitters replied, "You're deluding yourself, you're dead, you are in a new body. The bayonet may be sticking in the old body, but it's not really sticking in you now." To this the phantom replied, "Just try a bit yourself." It seems that the astral being was fully aware of the pain and would not admit that it was a delusion until one of the sitters apparently pulled the bayonet out. Where did the soldier get the idea of pain? From having it transmitted across the astral cable from the physical while conscious, because it was ultimately eliminated by the mind, does not prove that the pain did not exist. But you will say, how did you account for the bayonet? Surely there was no bayonet sticking in the phantom's astral body. But there was, not a physical bayonet, but an astral form of the bayonet created by the mind of the phantom. We will discuss how the mind creates its own environment later. Duplicate and shifting motivity. A tremendous force operates within the astral cable. I have often wished that some method could be devised for measuring this force in physical terms, that is, to determine just how much material weight could be moved by this force if the cable could make contact with it. I firmly believe that while projected and within cord activity range, if I could obtain some tangible grip upon a physical object, the force in the cable could move that object, even though the latter weighed a ton. From my experience, I have good reason to believe that a free cable can extend outward from the body, that is, a cable or rod without an astral body at its end, and that this free cable can exert a push and pull action and transmit motivity, which under certain conditions can cause wraps and move objects. One of the methods by which clairvoyance is said to be facilitated is by means of an astral line of force. Granting this to be true, it would be possible for the motivity of the subject's body to shift outside the body along the line of force, and with his bodily motivity thus exteriorized, the subject would be powerless for the time, although his astral body would still be in coincidence and he could be conscious. It has often been noted that a medium has been in this condition of powerlessness when raps were produced. The projection of the astral body. A rap produced at will during exteriorization of motivity. In fact, I have produced raps myself while in this state. I recall very distinctly waking one morning and finding myself minus my motivity. I reasoned within myself thus: if my motivity is extending outside my body and I am now conscious, why cannot I will that a rap be produced? And I did will with determination that a rap should come on the dresser. The rap was produced. As a rule, however, when one gets into this condition of exteriorized motivity, he becomes too excited ever to think of doing such a thing, and instead of willing his motivity away from him, he is only anxious for its return. As to moving objects when the astral body itself is projected on the end of the line of force under certain conditions, this can be done, and we shall discuss this later. For the moment, the point I wish to emphasize is this: motivity can shift across the astral body just as sensibility can. It can make quick shifts or slow shifts, and during astral projection within cord activity range, dual motivity can exist in some degree. Of this I am certain. When this occurs, every move of the projected end of the line of force reacts upon the subject's physical anatomy, usually in a slight manner, depending upon the amount of motivity still existing there, which as a rule is very little. With this condition of duplicate motivity, a move of the astral arm will produce a twitch in the physical arm, much as a dog's legs will twitch in his dreams. Duplicate motivity is much less common than duplicate sensibility, some persons seeming to be more inclined to it than others. It is present in the unconscious and the dream state more than in the conscious state. Here is the mystery, which is too deep for me, but I know it to be the truth. That is, that one can move an object in his dream, but that the object does not move until about 2 seconds later in reality. I have had an experience of this character myself, all of which reminds me of what Sir Oliver Lodge has stated in discussing the phenomena produced by Eusapia Palladino. He says, in part, the fact that the medium's body undergoes sympathetic or corresponding movements or twitches is very instructive and interesting. Sometimes when she, the medium, is going to push a distant object, she will make a little sudden push with her hand in this direction, and immediately afterward the object moves. Once this was done for my edification with constantly the same object, that is, a bureau in the corner of the room. When 6 or 7 feet away, the time interval between the push and the movement of the object was something like 2 seconds. When the accordion is being played, the fingers of the medium are moving in a thoroughly appropriate manner, and the process reminds me of the twitching of a dog's legs when he is supposed to be dreaming that he is chasing a hare. It is as if Eusapia were dreaming that she was fingering the instrument and dreaming it so vividly that the instrument was actually played. It is as if a dog dreamt of the chase with such energy that a distant hare was really captured and killed as by a phantom dog, and fanciful as for the moment it may seem, as valueless as I suppose such speculations are, I am to confess, at present more than half disposed to look in some such direction for a clue to these effects. In an idealistic conception of nature, it has by many philosophers been considered that thought is the reality and that material substratum is but a consequence of thought. So in a minor degree, it appears here. It is as if, let us say, the dream of the entranced person were vivid enough physically to affect surrounding objects and actually produce objective results, to cause not only real and permanent movements of ordinary objects, but also temporary, fresh aggregations of material particles into extraordinary objects, these aggregations being objective enough to be felt, heard, seen, and probably even photographed while they last. When I say that one can dream of moving a physical object and that if the object be moved, it's not moved in reality until about 2 seconds after one has dreamt that he has moved it, I mean just what I say, regardless of the fact that common sense would deny this. Perhaps this peculiarity will be fathomed in the future. When the physical body twitches in a dream, it is often because the dream body moves, and duplicate motivity causes the reaction upon the former. The phantom can lie above the physical body during sleep, of course, and duplicate involuntary actions take place, e.g., nervous twitches or similar unconscious movements on the part of the physical body. It is easier to move a physical object with a free line of force than with the astral body projected on the line of force. For in the former case, the motivity is concentrated at the point, while in the latter case, the motivity is required to manipulate the astral body, and if the body has its motivity restored to it, the motivity is diffused throughout it. I have often spoken of the tremendous magnetic pull exerted by the line of force during interiorization. It is interesting to know that this drawing in force is identical with the force which draws the materialized spirit back into the cabinet, and many prominent experimenters have found that when anything happens to the materialized form, it reacts upon the body of the medium in the cabinet. In other words, there is a line of force between the medium's physical body and the materialized form. The theory might be advanced that, on many occasions at least, it is the medium's astral body which materializes, constituting a duplicate material body of the medium outside the cabinet. Should this happen, and it does, what would the skeptic say? He would pronounce the manifestation of a fraud, and insisting that he had examined the medium's flesh and blood body, and to prove his argument he would stick a hat pin into the wrist of the materialized form, which of course would react upon the body of the medium inside the cabinet, and the scar would prove to the skeptic who knows nothing of repercussion and reaction that the medium had been faking. I do not by any means say that all mediums are genuine, but there is a possibility for a genuine medium to be discredited. If the psychic cable be severed while the astral body is projected, death to the physical body is the result. This is apparently what has taken place in certain seances when the body has been seized, which in such cases proved to be the astral body of the medium. It was prevented, as it were, from being drawn back into the physical. In some cases, which are on record, I believe, the medium has died in the cabinet. I am well acquainted with an old occultist, Carl Full, who told me that on one occasion a little girl who was sleeping in a hammock outside the seance room while the materialization seance was in process inside materialized in the seance room and claimed to be the daughter of a member of the circle who had a spirit daughter about the same age, yet the form was that of the girl sleeping in the hammock outside and had not been in any way transformed to represent the girl she claimed to be. The girl who slept in the hammock knew nothing of it on awaking. We know that thought can affect the form of the astral body, and it might be possible for some spirit wishing to manifest to impress the unconscious astral body of the medium into a form like its own and then talk through it. However, this is a subject into which we have no time to enter now. We have gone a long way in our discussion of duplicate motivity, but I believe that it has been worth our while. Chapter 6. The purpose of sleep. Footnote: sleep is the natural restorative, though how this is brought about is unknown. Brain and Mind by R.J.A. Berry. End of footnote. Separation and discoincidence have been used more or less as synonymous terms, although actually there is a difference in their meaning in relation to astral phenomena. The astral entity can be discoincided from the physical and yet not be separated from it, so that a clear space lies between the two. That is, the astral can be 1 inch out of coincidence, and still the body's wood and parts occupy the same space, yet these parts would not coincide with each other. I suppose you will say, if this were true, we should have known it before. Moreover, I tell you that every time you sleep, your astral body moves slightly out of coincidence, perhaps only a fraction of an inch, perhaps more. At any rate, there is a discoincidence during sleep, although this discoincidence may be infinitesimal and has little to do with one's ability to project. Even though projection is an extension of discoincidence, one can be normal, entirely immune to astral projection, yet his astral body always slightly discoincides during sleep. Hereward Carrington was on the right track when he wrote, "Various theories have been advanced in the past to explain sleep, but no satisfactory theory has ever been fully accepted. Thus we have so-called chemical theories, which endeavor to account for sleep by assuming that certain poisonous substances are formed in the body during waking hours and are eliminated during sleep. Others have suggested that sleep is due to peculiar conditions of the circulation of blood in the brain. Still others that the action of certain glands explains sleep. Others that muscular relaxation accounts for it. Others that the lack of external stimuli is sufficient to induce profound slumber. All of these theories have been shown insufficient to explain the facts. We shall never arrive at a satisfactory theory of sleep, doubtless, until we admit the presence of a vital force and the existence of an individual human spirit, which withdraws more or less completely from the body during the hours of sleep, and derives spiritual invigoration and nourishment during its sojourn in the spiritual world." End of quote. This is one thing about sleep we do not understand, and that is the process of unconsciousness. We do not know how unconsciousness is brought about. We do not know where the conscious mind seemingly evaporates to. We do know, however, the purpose of sleep. You would never recuperate nervous energy if the astral body conformed everlastingly to the physical and were in exact coincidence. We might term this natural discoincidence, which everyone undergoes, the zone of quietude, for there is no activity of the bodies there except the natural functioning. If you could see astrally someone asleep, you would observe the physical form, and above this, perhaps only extending a fraction of an inch beyond it, you would see an outline of the astral body. Remember, I'm speaking of only of natural sleep. Normally, the astral slides out of coincidence and into coincidence again, unnoticed by the subject going to sleep, or awakening, in a slow, quiet way. Yet it can do so with such speed that we cannot consciously comprehend this duration of time. It is usually in the hypnagogic state that this occurs, and as I have said before, the subject is seldom aware of it, seldom feels it, although at times he does so. Let us recall what Walsh has said regarding this. Sleep comes on gradually, the muscles slowly relaxing and the senses becoming dulled. Many people on going to sleep experience the feeling of sliding down a hole or an incline and sometimes awaken startled. These people are of a nervous type, though fatigue or slight deviation from good health may predispose to the sensation. It is possible, by paying attention to the sensations which are psychologically present in the hypnagogic state, to know the relaxation of the muscles and the sinking or sliding sensation accompanying it. End of quote. Now, if you could hold consciousness up to the last moment in the hypnagogic state, you would feel this act of discoincidence, as indeed nervous and fatigued people often do. And why do they? Because the astral always moves into the zone of quietude or slightly discoincides during sleep, for the purpose of charging with universal or cosmic energy. In the nervous persons, in the fatigued, the condenser, the astral body is greatly run down. That is what nervousness really is. The astral moves out more easily, sooner, while unconsciousness follows a moment later. Hence, the subject experiences the astral body movement. And just here, another eccentric sensation is felt. The astral, where the mind really is, often gets the sensation of sinking or sliding, because the sensibility is on both sides. And the physical seems to move downward, while as a matter of fact the astral moves upward. The subject, of course, thinks that he is in the physical body, while the truth is that he is a fraction of an inch discoincided from it. The question, no doubt, has presented itself in your mind: can the subject feel this disattachment of the astral when in the fact of projection? Naturally, the subject would have to be conscious in order to know anything as to what is taking place. And if he is, there are certain sensations which, when once he has become familiar with their significance, he will always recognize as signs of the loosening of the astral body. One does not have to experience an extensive projection in order to know what these feelings are like. He can experience them in the hypnagogic state when going to sleep, if he will but concentrate his attention upon himself and try to see what is really happening as he enters sleep. In other words, if he will but train himself to keep the balance between consciousness and unconsciousness while slightly favoring the former, without tension of mind, and will maintain this well into the hypnagogic state, he will feel this discoincidence as the phantom enters the zone of quietude, usually as a falling sensation, or as if air had suddenly accumulated under the center of his body, mostly under the stomach. A slight repercussion of body generally follows this, if conscious, because of emotion. There is one thing more to which I would call attention. When the subconscious contemplates an extensive projection, the astral phantom is put under the spell of catalepsy. This can take place either while in exact coincidence or in the zone of quietude. If it, the astral body, becomes cataleptic while in exact coincidence with the physical will be cataleptic. But if it comes under the spell while the phantom is in the zone of quietude, the physical does not become cataleptic. These conditions do not develop suddenly but creep over one almost unnoticed, and the subject must be very impressionable to catch them at all. When you experience the falling or sliding sensation in the hypnagogic state and become startled, usually jumping, you may think you have been slightly conscious up to that time, but if you will observe the psychological changes very carefully, you will find that consciousness was slowly diminishing all the time. It was slowly diminishing, almost gone, then the sliding feeling concurrent with the startled jump, and you are conscious again. And if you think about it, you will admit that for a moment you were not sure of being conscious. It was during that very brief moment of unknowingness that the subconscious will moved the phantom. Dream control. Many dreams are instigated by the state of the mind at this time, and you will acquire the ability to dream a certain dream, and in that dream you will often keep the body astral moving on instead of stopping in the zone of quietude. We shall see before finishing this work how an astral projector can be dreaming and suddenly become conscious and find his body projected in an environment suited to the dream. I have done this several times and will relate these instances later. Thus you can by practice produce a desired dream. This is called dreaming true, and dream control is one method of producing projection of the astral phantom, and a pleasant way too. Of this subject, Howard Carrington says, there is a practical experiment which may be conducted by which true dreams can be induced. It's very important to observe yourself in the process of falling to sleep, to observe consciousness while it's passing into the dream state. If you conduct experiments of this character on yourself, you will be enabled gradually to keep conscious control of yourself up to the moment you fall asleep. And this self-observation, the consciousness of going to sleep, is extremely interesting. When you have learned to do that, then construct before yourself mentally a definite scene which you must hold firmly in mind. Then as you are falling to sleep, hold the scene before you, and at the very last moment before you fall asleep, consciously transfer yourself into the scene. In other words, step into the picture, and if you have developed yourself to the requisite point, you will be enabled to carry over an unbroken consciousness into the dream state, and this way you have a perfect continuity of thought. There is no break in the consciousness. You step into the dream picture and go on dreaming consciously. That is the process of dreaming true, and after this dream is fully enacted, then you should remember perfectly all that has transpired during the sleep period. I wonder if Mr. Carrington knows how almost perfectly in harmony his instructions for dreaming true are with the method of dream control used to induce the astral body out into space to enact a part in that dream. One step beyond what Mr. Carrington has here given is the accomplishment of moving out the astral body to a locale which the subconscious hitches up with a dream formulated by the conscious. Later, when you learn the method of promoting projection and learn how to induce factors which are positive or favorable to projection, you will be able to cause the astral actually to step out into the dream and will either remember all that has transpired on awakening or will become wide awake during the act of the dream. In that case, the dream vanishes and you are there, projected. This, you will recall, was the formula followed by Dr. Van Eden when brought him such successful results. Care must be taken, however, in constructing the dream, and the dream must be fully thought out by the conscious mind and repeatedly constructed before the subconscious can produce it accordingly. Now, the nature of the dream to be produced is important and should be built upon lines of action which correspond to the actions which the astral phantom naturally follows on exteriorizing, so that the sensation in the dream will agree with the sensation produced by the action of the phantom, should that phantom awaken. The nature of the dream must necessarily be that of plausibility, so that the sensation of the dream is enjoyed by the dreamer and is also in harmony with the sensation of exteriorization. Then, if separation be induced, the sensations and emotions will be pleasant should the phantom begin to regain consciousness. A dream which agrees in action and sensation with the same actions and sensations produced by exteriorization will tend to pull the phantom out. Action, of course, means action of self in the dream. One must have movement of self outstanding in the dream, must always be participating in the dream, not merely standing back and looking on. Still stronger promotive factors to projection will be induced if the dream be of this nature and centered around a desire or suppressed desire. Later I shall give specific directions for producing astral projection by dream control. A word of warning: if you are neurotic, easily influenced, lack will, and are fearful, if you have any reason to believe yourself susceptible to obsession, if you live in an atmosphere of discord, do not try to practice astral body projection. If you are this type, never think within yourself and never watch yourself in the process of falling asleep. Turn toward physical culture rather than psychical culture. Subjects of nervous temperament are best suited for psychic experiments. While everyone slightly discoincides during sleep, that is, moves into the zone of quietude, those of a nervous temperament do so sooner, more easily, and exteriorize further than those of other temperaments. Temperament, after all, has much to do with projection. The neurotic types, not being bound so strongly to the physical body, are the best subjects of projection, although other types are not to be considered immune. Hereward Carrington, who has gone deeply into all the phases of the occult, and whom I shall no doubt quote freely throughout this work, says, in summing up the experiments of Dr. Charles Lancelin, a French scientist and occultist, the right or suitable temperament must be chosen for the experiment, and if this be not found, the experiment is liable to fail or only succeed partially. Temperament must not be confused with character or mental makeup. The temperament is a psychological state produced by the predominance of an element, organ, or system in the human body. There are 4 chief types of temperament: nervous, bilious, lymphatic, and sanguine. Of these, the nervous temperament is the best suited for psychic experiments of all kinds. The bilious is the most receptive, the sanguine is liable to hallucinations, both subjective and objective, while the lymphatic is the least suitable of all from every point of view. Of course, one's temperament is usually a compound of all these, which are rarely found in their ideal state, but the predominantly nervous temperament is the best suited for this test, as for all other psychic experiments. Now, there is at all times a certain outflowing of nervous force, or externalization of neuricity, as it is called, in all individuals, but this becomes very pronounced in certain types of individuals known as mediums or psychics. In them, this force, which is thus radiated, can be measured by means of specially constructed instruments known as biometers, stenometers, etc. Several instruments of this kind have been devised by French experimenters. They show that there is a repulsive force generated from one side of the body and an attractive force from the other side. In normal human beings, these forces should be equal. When they are not, odd things are likely to happen in their immediate environment. Their relative power may be tested by means of these instruments. Although, as Lancelin has pointed out, there is an inflowing and outflowing of cosmic energy or force in all types during the waking hours, the outflow exceeds the inflow, especially in the nervous type. So, when sleep intervenes, which is nature's way of charging up the condenser, the astral condenser separates from the physical body. The nervous type, requiring the greatest amount of recharging, moves out of coincidence more easily, sooner, and to a greater distance than any other type. When outside cord activity range, the phantom is free. Once the phantom advances beyond cord activity range, it is free and subject to its own will. There is no longer any liability to eccentricities of the senses, instability of body, or other complications which are present before reaching the superior position. These complications do not all disappear in an instant, but gradually, as the body has been advancing, and when projection eventually reaches a certain point, the cable has diminished to its minimum caliber, resembling a long strand of spider web and showing no activity whatever. Regardless of the apparent deadness or laxity of the cord, there is necessarily an intrinsic flow of cosmic energy from the astral or animate to the physical or inanimate. But this flow of force by no means compares in quality with that it was before this advancement. Prolonged projection. In the type of projection which is distant and prolonged, the physical may take on a cadaverous aspect, the cosmic energy it receives being meager in amount. There are accounts of people who, while projected, have been thought dead. This is rare, of course, but the physical body may have all the appearances of being dead. When projection is out of this type, the temperature of the torpid member may take an unbelievable fall, the condition much resembling hibernation in animals. The projector cannot get lost. You may wonder if this projection is not after all a dangerous practice. You may wonder if the phantom, once free, cannot lose itself, if it might not remain at a distance for too long a period of time and allow the physical body to expire. As a rule, the subconscious controlling power knows exactly what it's doing. It is a far better detector of conditions than the conscious mind. Do you think that one could project himself into the free state outside core activity range and be conscious there and refuse to come back and thus allow his physical body to die? Naturally, one who has never projected may seize upon this idea, but he will find when he attempts to stay away too long from the physical body that he cannot retain consciousness. Some authorities believe that a projector can become lost while out of the body. This is not true. Again, these same authorities will tell you that the astral body can project to distant and unfamiliar places by an effort of will. This is true, and being true, the projector cannot become lost, for he can return to his physical body by willing to do so. The subconscious mind can intervene in the twinkling of an eye and pull back the phantom instantly from any distant place into core activity range, whence it is pulled back into the physical. In fact, it is subconscious power that speeds the phantom to distant places and back again, even though consciousness be never missed during that infinitesimal moment. One cannot be walking about outside core activity range, perfectly conscious, and suddenly find himself under subconscious control and moving toward the physical to interiorize. So you see, it makes no difference whether one does get outside core activity range and is free. He is still under the operating subconscious will. You may have nursed the opinion that one might become dissociated from his physical counterpart and wander into some strange place in the astral, and being conscious not have the insight or sense of direction to find his way back again to his material abode. This is impossible. The subconscious will can shoot one back into the physical, almost before the thought of getting back has fully completed itself. You may think that the conscious mind is in itself wonderful. You may fancy that you can think and act with rapidity, but once you have become conscious in the astral body, you will realize that what a snail's pace the conscious mind moves in comparison with the superintelligence, which is subconscious. If you undertake to develop projection of the astral body, you need have no fear of becoming lost in the astral. How the physical is recharged during projection. I have on different occasions observed that while one is in the free state, no matter whether in the immediate environment of the shell or remote from it, he will be shot back within core activity range at intervals, and at once the physical body will begin to respire in a stronger manner. It is plain that the subconscious has an eye on the condition of the physical body as well as everything else, and that the condenser of cosmic energy, the phantom, is brought back to charge up the physical through the medium of the cable, which has increased in size as the bodies approach one another and is carrying over a stronger line of force. In his book Higher Psychical Development, Carrington has said, this question of the projection of the astral body is a very important one because in the first place it is one of the most interesting of all psychic experiments and is, in one sense, the object of attainment of all three schools, the yoga, the occult, and the psychic. They all endeavor to arrive at very much the same result by different means, and they attain it in different degrees of self-consciousness. When the yogi has obtained the degree of perfection in which he can project his astral body at will, he can travel to great distances and see and hear distant events, which accounts for the Hindu's extraordinary power of knowing things which are happening at a distance, and also renders possible voluntary interment for long periods of time, burial, and so forth, the astral being removed from the physical. The body of sensation being entirely gone, The physical body merely keeps up its vegetative functions for the time being, sufficiently to allow life, in some sense, to remain in it. But you see, the physical body is supported on this theory by a continuous life current which travels to it from the astral body through this astral cord or connection, connecting it with the astral. And after he is revived and has been restored from the trance state, the yogi claims to remember the experiences which he has passed through during this period of interment, when he was apparently dead to the outer world. In her commendable work, My Experiences While Out of My Body, Cora L.V. Richmond has said, I became aware of being led to where the earthly form was still breathing, being cared for and imbued with breath by a guardian spirit and by devoted friends in human life. From this we learn, and it is true, that friends in the invisible realm can and many times do lend a helping hand to the projected medium, which naturally is a great asset in conquering this phase. There is one inconsistency found in this testimony of Mrs. Richmond, however, which is that her guardian spirit is credited with imbuing the senseless body with breath. We have already learned that the force which regulates breathing is transmitted from the astral body to the physical through the astral cord. To imbue the earthly counterpart with life is the ultimate purpose of the astral cord. Friends in the invisible world can aid. Of this there can be no doubt, but the power of respiration comes through the astral cable. It is probable that Mrs. Richmond, beholding a friend watching over her, assumed that she has said was true. That what she has said was true. Astral exteriorization is not dependent upon spirits in any way, yet they, spirits, can assist. Projection can take place without a mortal or spirit ever nearing the physical form. The directing power lies within the individual himself. It is evident that Mrs. Richmond took it for granted that the guardian spirit was responsible for the breathing process. It has been shown how, during projection into the free state, the phantom is brought back at intervals to recharge the physical. Further searching into Mrs. Richmond's experiences reveals the fact that she was, after all, aware of this line of force operating between the bodies, for in another place she says, these periods of calling my attention to and visiting the body were brief, just enough to keep the vital spark alive, etc. A student, in attempting this phase, should never forget that the superintelligence which performs this seeming miracle is within himself. He need never suppose that in undertaking his development, he is entrusting his life to the conscious intelligence of anyone, either mortal or spirit, although he should be thankful for any aid others may render him. It is the superintelligence within him which handles the situation, and if he even forms the idea that he must depend upon others in the spirit, he will probably never achieve his aim. To accomplish results, therefore, do not go outside yourself, go within yourself. I am a jealous God, says the Bible. The God within you is likewise, and if you do not depend upon his wisdom, but believe it's to be found in spirits, he will not act favorably. Not dead, but sleeping. There are, of course, exceptions to all rules, but in following the usual course of life, we depend upon the general trend and not upon the exceptional. And although the subconscious during a projection almost invariably carries itself with omnipotent dignity, there is always the possibility of some complication. The controlling intelligence may make occasional mistakes, but when it does so, it is because of some foreign influence. So, if there are recorded cases of mediums having met with unfortunate results or even death, it is because of the exceptional. Cora L.V. Richmond is said to have remained projected in the astral for many days. Hamid Bey, the youngest of Egyptian fakirs, whose marvelous demonstrations of the power of the mind over the body have startled the Western world, has undertaken several prolonged public burials. He remained buried an hour in Atlanta, 3 hours in Eaglewood, 7 hours in San Diego, etc., without any coffin having been placed directly in the ground, with the earth covering his face and body, in the presence of skeptical newspaper men. Accounts of these burials were published in the press at the time and are available to any interested reader. Although these performances may strike the average spectator as almost unbelievable, such demonstrations are by no means uncommon in the Orient, and hundreds of similar cases have been reported by travelers returning from India, Egypt, and other Eastern countries. Many of these burials were under excellent conditions, the whole procedure being controlled by skeptical witnesses. Some years ago, a celebrated fakir from the province of Lahore, India, was buried for a period of 30 days under the supervision of Prince Ranjit Singh and Sir Claude Wade. The fakir was placed in a sack after entering the state of catalepsy, which was securely tied. The sack was then placed in a box, which was locked, the keys being kept by the British general. The box was then deposited in a brick vault, the door of which was sealed with Ranjit Singh's seal, and a guard of British soldiers was detailed to guard the vault day and night. At the end of the 30 days, the vault was opened, the box and sack unfastened, and the fakir, very emaciated but still alive, was resuscitated by his friends. If projection of this type were not fully governed by an all-knowing intelligence, the body would surely have been neglected, and should the unusual intervene, that is, should the astral body not be pulled back within cord activity range from time to time to recharge the physical, death would have been the natural consequence. It is obvious that during an extensive and prolonged projection, the material counterpart might assume the characteristics of a corpse, and the temperature drop exceedingly low, even to such an extent that the misunderstanding people of the world would pronounce the subject dead. I have concluded, as the result of a study of the subject, that the heart may actually cease beating for some time, and yet the astral cord may not be disconnected. Naturally, this condition could not exist long before the cord would snap. In a recent press article, the head of the American Medical Association stated that resuscitation is sometimes possible after 4 hours of apparent death. Mr. Carrington has written several books on death and has summarized many cases of premature burial. There can be no doubt, says this authority, that many hundreds of persons have been buried alive during the centuries which have preceded us. Societies for the prevention of premature burial have actually been formed in England, America, etc. Cases of trance, catalepsy, suspended animation, etc. were mistaken for death before our modern methods of diagnosis were introduced. Historical accounts and the statements of returning spirits, if this testimony may be accepted as probable, seem to indicate that the astral line of force severs more rapidly at death with some individuals than with others. It is probable that we exercise too much haste in soliciting the services of the undertaker when someone is pronounced dead, and, as the saying goes, not allowing the corpse to get cold. There are many records of people who have been pronounced dead and returning to life, and there is always such a possibility if the astral cable be still intact, even though it be exceptional. Exteriorization might be enduring. The physical appear cadaverous, and an embalmer might have completed his work before the termination of a prolonged projection. In one book, which has the endorsement of prominent spiritualists, a spirit claims to have been earthbound and related that he was held in this condition because a mere thread was holding him to the physical counterpart for many months after the burial. How much truth there may be in this account, I do not know. In the Bible, there are several accounts of individuals who were brought back to life. Take, for example, Christ's resurrection of his friend Lazarus. If Lazarus were actually dead and the astral cable disconnected, then Christ did perform a miracle. But if the cable was still engaged, it was an apparent miracle, and the resurrection was merely a resuscitation. Christ was a marvelous occultist and seer, the peer of mediums, and was a friend of Lazarus. Might it not be possible that Lazarus was an astral projector? There seems to have been some misunderstanding on the part of the disciples as to whether Lazarus was really dead or not. Christ first of all told his followers that Lazarus was not dead. The sickness is not unto death. Next, he told that then Lazarus was asleep. Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go now that I may awake him from sleep. Christ next went to the grave where Lazarus lay, a cave with a stone upon it. He ordered the stone to be removed, and with a loud voice cried, Lazarus, come forth! And he that was dead came forth. Could not a spiritual demonstration be given today by a hypnotist and an astral projector? Another Bible instance of resuscitation is the bringing to life of a certain ruler's daughter. And he cometh to the house of a ruler of the synagogue, and seeth the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he was come in, he said unto them, Why make ye this ado, and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, and entered the inn where the damsel was lying. And he took the damsel by the hand, and he said unto them, Talitha cumi, which is, being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked. For these singular demonstrations Christ gained the reputation of being capable of resurrecting the dead, but in every case Jesus himself stated that the subjects were not dead, but sleeping. If the persons were literally dead, if the line of force had actually been severed, and still they were brought back to life, is it not a wonder that more were not likewise revived? Surely there were others begging to be reunited with their loved ones, innocent children crying for their mothers, lovers begging for their sweethearts who lay in death, pathetic mourners all about, and yet only a few were resurrected. There is much evidence to sustain the belief that those who were restored were still on the astral plane, but it's not necessary to go back to Bible times to find accounts of those who, having been thought dead, were miraculously restored to life. Such things occasionally happen in every generation. Knowing this to be true, at one time in France, bodies of those pronounced dead were first taken to a morgue, there to lie under a watch for a definite time before burial was permitted. Thus, it was hoped to avoid the possibility that any of the victims might be prematurely interred. Not many years ago, in a little Iowa town, funeral services were taking place. The victim lay in state in the church, and as her friends were taking the last view of the remains, blood was seen oozing from the nose of the corpse. The woman came back to life and lived for many years afterward. This writer is acquainted with trustworthy persons who can swear to the truth of this incident. All this, of course, relates directly to astral phenomena. Once the astral cable severs from the physical body, that body is on the road to the dust whence it came. What has been said in the preceding paragraphs regarding projection need not frighten the student who is attempting to develop. The chances that the subconscious will go wrong are insignificant. Severe sickness in which life is a matter of uncertainty is usually the cause of such disastrous results as have been depicted, and in this case the projection is brought out involuntarily. It may readily be seen that, although sickness is an incentive toward projection of the astral body, one should not be in too subnormal a condition physically when attempting a prolonged projection. The astral cable is akin to the umbilical cord. Now that we have compared projection with death, let us for a moment compare it with birth. Do not the astral body and the astral cable afford striking similarities to the newborn physical body and the umbilical cord? And after all, which process is the more mysterious? So far as understanding the intelligence behind either of these processes is concerned, they are in the same category. It has always occurred to me as inconsistent for the skeptic to refer to birth as natural and astral projection as supernatural when he can explain neither. It merely is this: what we call natural is natural only because we have become familiar with it. For even the natural is often inexplicable. Because he is unfamiliar with the phenomenon of astral projection, the unbeliever scorns the idea on the ground that it's supernatural. Still, physical birth, with the body existing at the end of the cord, is called natural simply because he is familiar with it, not that it is less mysterious than projection. But such is the way of human mind. The supernatural undoubtedly does not exist. It is the unfamiliar which is called supernatural. A grain of sand is as mysterious as a planet, a physical body as mysterious as an astral body, the umbilical cord as mysterious as the astral cord. So when we think of that wonderful organism, the astral cord, and wonder at its ability to sustain life, there may be some satisfaction or dissatisfaction in knowing that the astral and umbilical cords are strikingly similar. Chapter 7. Where the astral line of force makes contact with the bodies. Investigation into the matter seems to indicate that there is a conflict of opinion among authorities as to where the point of contact is with the astral line of force makes with the bodies. We know, at least we should know, that there are so many different conditions involved, so many differing individual makeups, such various and intermingled degrees of matter, that naturally some experimenters arrive at conclusions which are at variance with those of others. One authority holds that the astral cord adheres to the physical body at the solar plexus, situated just behind the stomach. Another maintains that the spot is low down on the forehead, between the eyes, and still others, and they seem in the majority, maintain the belief that the point of contact is the medulla oblongata. I believe that the latter is true and that the evidence for this outweighs all evidence to the contrary. If all these claims can be vindicated, then the controversy lies only in the opinions of their originators. The truth is that the cable can extend from any of the several vital centers of the body. One well-known authority on the subject, who ranks second to none and whose word carries much weight, is a staunch adherent to the belief that the astral cord finds its point of contact at the solar plexus, that is, of the physical body. But where does it join the astral body, if this be true? Does it center at the solar plexus of the projected body too? Surely, if it does so, the conscious astral projector must find himself in a clumsy condition when within cord activity range. This is what my experience has revealed. I have never found the cable making contact with the physical body at the solar plexus, but I have observed it to do so at the front, side, and back of the head. But with me, the astral end has invariably adhered to the medulla oblongata region of the phantom. I make the suggestion, however, that the experimenters who hold to the solar plexus point of contact use suggestion to that effect while developing. Be that as it may, the reason why the astral cable fastens at different spots of physical head is because of the position of the physical body at the time of projection. The astral and physical bodies coincide. In whatever way the physical body lies, so will the astral lie. If the physical be facing upward while lying in the horizontal position, the astral will emerge facing upward also. The astral cable will thus come out of the physical at the front of the head, between the eyes, and fasten onto the phantom at the back of the head, the medulla oblongata region. I might add that this is the ideal position for projection. On the other hand, if the physical be facing downward while lying in the horizontal position, the astral body will emerge facing downward. The astral cable will thus circle from the medulla oblongata of the physical directly over the top of the head to the medulla oblongata of the phantom. If one be conscious when a projection from this position occurs, he will feel the astral cord circling over his head in the astral, and it will feel like a piece of soft hose in which there are regular pulsations. I had the following experience several years ago, which illustrates this point. Turning over in the air. The first perception I had in this experience was that my head was drawn downward until my chin rested upon my chest, and that something was thumping me on the top and back of my head. An instant later, I was awake in the astral and found that my head was drawn downward. My chin was resting upon my chest. The thumping in my head was due to the pulsations in the astral cable. In this condition, I was lying in the air just under the ceiling of the room. I could not move voluntarily and seemed to be smothering. I was lying upon my chest physically and was likewise facing downward in my astral body. Thus, it was that the astral line of force pulled my head downward, and I could feel it resting upon my head from that point, then down over the top of my head, as plainly as if it had been a piece of garden hose fastened to the back of my astral head and pulled over the top, forcing my head onto my chest and pulsating all the time. This experience proved conclusively to me that the astral cable is always attached at the medulla oblongata region of the astral body, for there never would have been a better time for it to have been attached elsewhere. Yet it made contact at this point, which on this occasion was not an ideal arrangement. For several moments I stayed in this position. Then I noticed that I was beginning to turn over to my side. I thought that my head would be twisted from my body. The turnover movement continued until I eventually found myself lying upon my back in the air. This once accomplished, the controlling power began to move me outward and downward into a standing position. Just why the ruling intelligence found it necessary to turn me over in the air before completing the projection, I do not know. On interiorization, the same process took place in the reverse order. I was pulled first from the upright into the horizontal position, that is, to a point directly above my physical body. This movement took place while I lay face upward in the air. I was then turned over and slowly dropped face downward into the physical mechanism, which lay face downward upon the bed. If this experience could be considered typical, it would appear that lying upon one's back is the ideal position for projection. The four brains of man. Of course, where the astral cable appears to make contact with the head and where it actually ends are two different questions. The cable might appear to the projector to be centered at the medulla oblongata, the front or the side of the physical head, depending upon which side faced upward at the time, and still it would only be apparent, and the cable might actually end inside the head at the pineal gland for aught we know. There are four large nervous or psychic centers in the body, four brains of man, they are sometimes called: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the medulla oblongata and the solar plexus. Besides these, there are the pituitary body and the pineal gland. Because projection of the astral body depends in some degree upon concentration centered upon one or more of those centers, we must discuss them briefly. The cerebrum, divided into two hemispheres, is the frontal portion of the brain within the cranium. The cerebellum lies behind and below the cerebrum. The two are connected by a short stalk known as the midbrain. The solar plexus, abdominal brain, is in the abdomen just behind the stomach. It is complexly composed of material similar to that composing the other two brains. The medulla oblongata is a bulbous continuation of the upper end of the spinal cord, extending into the skull and lying below the cerebellum. It is a peculiar arrangement of division strands of the ganglia connected with the two neighboring vital centers. It is well known that within the medulla oblongata are located certain nerves which have control over the functions of respiration. I leave it to the reader's judgment whether this would be an ideal spot for the astral line of force to connect with and thus deliver the force of respiration. The pineal gland, situated within the brain, is a peculiar organ, the pineal gland, which until recent years was a source of mystery, although the Orientals have long held that the gland has significance in relation to the occult. The pineal gland, aside from its physiological importance is now recognized by many Western students of psychics, as well as by the Orientals, as being a connecting link between the physical and spiritual worlds. Swami Bhakta Vishita states, the pineal gland is a mass of nervous substance which is found located in the brain in a position near the center of the skull, almost directly above the extreme top of the spinal column. It is shaped like a small cone and is of a reddish-gray color. It lies in front of the cerebellum and is attached to the third ventricle of the brain. It contains a small quantity of gritty particles, a sand-like substance, which is commonly known as brain sand. It derives its scientific name from its shape, which resembles a pine cone. The Oriental occultists claim that the pineal gland, with its peculiar arrangement of nerve cell corpuscles and its tiny grains of brain sand, is intimately associated with certain forms of transmission and reception of waves of mental vibration. Western students have been struck with the remarkable resemblance between the pineal gland and a certain part of the receiving apparatus employed in wireless telegraphy, the latter also containing small particles which bear a close resemblance to brain sand of the pineal gland. The pituitary body. The pituitary body, situated in front of and below the pineal gland, is another organ regarded as having an occult significance. There is a connecting link between the two bodies, the pineal gland and the pituitary body, over which it is claimed a subtle force operates. Dr. W. H. Downer says on the subject, molecular motions in the pineal gland cause spiritual clairvoyance, but to make this clairvoyance illumine the field of the universe, the fires of the pituitary body must unite with the fires of the pineal gland, and this union means that the sixth and seventh senses have become as one, or in other words, that the individual consciousness is so indrawn that the magnetic sphere of the highest mentality and the highest spiritual sense is conjoined. Considering the important functions of any or all of these vital centers, one would be perfectly safe in asserting that the astral cable can deliver the breath of life into any one of them while the phantom is projected, and that the energy would be properly distributed. For after all, the nervous system is in tune, one part with another, throughout the entire physical mechanism. Some authorities have found that concentration upon the pineal gland, properly concentrated thought of course, will facilitate the projection of the astral body, and there is little doubt that a line of force will be created at the spot upon which the subject concentrates. The force is not created by the physical nervous center. The physical nervous center is operated upon by force. The cosmic energy. None of the vital bodies mentioned in the foregoing can create the force which operates through them. They are but its distributors, rectifiers, transformers, the complicated mechanical arrangements that the energy of life works through and upon. Because the physical body can be destroyed, that in no sense destroys the force behind the body, and any more than breaking an electric bulb would destroy the energy operating through it. It is interesting to know that there have been people who have had portions of their brains taken out without apparent ill effects. Gelley, in his work From the Unconscious to the Conscious, cites many such, the surgical operations having been performed upon soldiers in France during the war. Physiologists do not believe that the vital energy, consciousness, sensibility, motivity can exist apart from the physical mechanism, believing that the material body itself creates the energy. The main reason for their belief is that it cannot be proved that the physical body does not create its energy, but it cannot be proved that the physical body does create its energy either. Therefore, there is no foundation for that belief. The physical body itself cannot even hold the energy of life, that energy being held in the astral condenser and poured through the physical during projection by means of the line of force running to a vital center of the physical mechanism. To discuss astral phenomena, even life itself, without discussing the energy which is behind it all, would be like building a house without a foundation. like discussing electrical appliances and ignoring the force which operates them. Perhaps it has never occurred to you that the energy you are using is cosmic, present everywhere, that it's not created by you but is attracted by you and condensed in your astral body, which, as you have already learned, does its recharging during sleep and therefore has an important bearing upon astral projection. You must realize also that food and diet constitute an important factor in the phenomenon of astral body separation. The ordinary belief concerning energy is that it's created by the body, that to eat so much food will produce so much energy. If this idea were true, we could easily substitute food for sleep, and the minute we felt ourselves becoming tired, weak, or enervated, simply eat more food and thus never need sleep. If this were true, the more food we injected, the more energy we should create. But scientific investigators have found that to stuff the invalid only makes the condition worse. Food is material like the physical body and builds up the body because the cosmic force operates upon it, not because it produces energy in itself. Dr. Lindlar's views on energy. Let us now turn our attention for a few moments to what Dr. Henry Lindlar, world-famous food scientist and exponent of nature cures, has to say in answer to the question, for what reason do we eat and drink? Says Dr. Lindlar, the majority of people would reply, why, everyone knows that from food and drink we derive our strength. Are you so sure about this? Do you really believe that the large amount of animal heat and vital energy which the human body manufactures, radiates, and expends every 24 hours is derived from a few pounds of food consumed in the course of the day? Any hard-working laborer or athlete spends an enormous amount of power and energy every day. A healthy individual may continue to do this for several weeks without taking any food whatever. The best proof that not all the heat and muscular energy of the body are derived from the combustion of food materials is furnished by a long fast. Of late years, since fasting has become popular as a natural remedy, many thousands of people have fasted from 4 to 10 weeks at a stretch. The majority of these marathon fasters report but slight loss in physical energy. Many claim that they are stronger at the end of the fast than at the beginning. The loss of animal heat is negligible, while in some cases the temperature declines a fraction of a degree or a degree. In the majority of cases, it remains normal. We have verified this in hundreds of cases under close observation in our institutions. To cite a case from personal observation, one of our patients suffering from typhoid fever did not take any food except water for 7 weeks. At the end of that time, his body temperature was normal. During the last 2 weeks of the fast, he lost only 2 pounds. Another patient afflicted with cancer of the stomach lived 2 years on a few ounces of food daily, mostly white of egg and fruit juices. His temperature was normal almost to the last. Whether sweltering under the tropical sun of the equator or freezing in the Arctic cold, the temperature of the body is exactly the same. If it drops or rises a few degrees below or above normal, death ensues. This regulation of animal heat, regardless of the surrounding temperature and within certain limits, regardless of the quantity and quality of food consumed, is one of the greatest mysteries of our wonderful human organism. If foods were the only source of animal heat and working energy, fasting for a long period would be impossible. The temperature of the body would sink below normal soon after the commencement of the fast. It may be said that while abstaining from food, the body lives upon itself, that it consumes its own tissues. This, however, does not account for the production of all the heat and energy expended during the fast. Continuing the subject, Lindlar says, if they, foods, do not give life, what then are the functions of food and drink in the economy of the body? All that they can do is to furnish the materials to keep the system in such a condition that vital force can manifest in and through it. The inflow of life force into the cells and organs of the body and its free distribution by way of the nervous system depend upon a normal or healthy condition of the organism. Anything and everything in natural methods of living and of treatment that will help build up the blood on a normal basis, that will purify the system of waste and morbid matter, that will correct mechanical lesions and harmonize mental and emotional conditions, will ensure a greater supply of life force and its derivatives, strength, vitality, resistance, and recuperative power. In other words, the more normal, healthy, and perfect the organism, the more copious will be the inflow of vital energy. Foods, fasting, and psychic development. When such exhaustive researchers as Dr. Lindlar must go outside the body to find the source of its vital energy, is it not time for others too to recognize the omnipresent force working all about them and through them? It is impossible here to go into the study of foods and dietetics. The study of food and its effects upon life constitutes a science in itself. Plainly, different foods bring about different conditions in the body, some seeming to supply more energy, some less, depending no doubt upon the way in which they attract or repulse the vital energy which is cosmic and which is held by the astral body, the condenser of cosmic energy. It is probable that the negative and positive charges in foods in some unknown manner affect the astral body. The physical body is built up by the foods because the basic elements of matter constituting both foods and flesh are united, but the energy is manifested in and through the astral counterpart. There is an occult doctrine regarding food, says Carrington. It is that a vegetarian diet tends to make the molecules of protoplasm shorter and more sensitive to shorter wavelengths. It is quite conceivable that it should actually do this. We know that a bar of iron becomes quote-unquote magnetized when all the molecules of its structure are as it were pointed in the same direction. If you strike a magnet of this type, a sharp blow with a hammer, or heat it red hot and allow it to become cool again, it will be found to have lost its magnetism. What has happened? Probably the molecules of iron, which before had been uniform in their polarity, are now pointing in all directions, and hence the energy which formerly played on or through the bar of iron in one continuous unbroken stream is now broken up and playing in 1,000 different directions. Hence the iron will no longer be a magnet. It is possible that something of the same sort takes place in the body, and that its molecules, when finely attuned by rhythm and acting in unison, may allow a flow through the body of energies which would otherwise be limited or altogether restrained in their action. This is merely by way of suggestion, which one may take for what it may be worth. Mr. Prescott F. Hall, in a most interesting article in the Journal of the American Society of Psychical Research, says a vegetable diet tends to loosen the vibric matter of the astral body, and vegetables, fruits, and prunes make the blood able to attract spiritual power. Carrots are also beneficial. Nuts, especially peanuts, are bad, especially near the time of sitting for development, as they tend to make one's atmosphere of one color. Raw eggs are favorable. Liquids are favorable to development. Fasting often helps the liberation of the astral body. You will notice that Mr. Hall has stated that liquids are favorable to development, yet he does not state in what way they are beneficial, nor to what type of development. It must take exception to this and I must take exception to this and shall shortly point out that in developing astral projection, abstinence from liquids constitutes an important positive factor. However, Mr. Hall is correct in his assertion that fasting often helps the liberation of the astral body. It is enough to say that food is one of the most vitally important factors of life, but it's as necessary to eat the right kind of food as it is to eat at all. I know that in stating this fact I shall arouse the ire of many spiritualists who think along the lines of mental healing and Christian Science, their motto being, "Leave the food question alone, the mind will take care of that." While healing by the power of the mind is not by any means an untruth, the idea that one can ignore the food question is ridiculous. Food is as necessary as breathing. Why not stop breathing and let the mind take care of that? The question is, do these people eat? If so, why? They will answer that they eat because it's necessary to sustain physical life, but that it makes no difference what they eat, just so it be labeled food. Now, if it be necessary to eat at all, it's necessary to eat properly. I wonder if the mental healers could eat dirt and, by using their minds, make it nourish their bodies. They would say dirt is not food, but many of the things eaten by us every day belong to the same category. For instance, it's not generally known, but many investigators know, that much the so-called whole wheat sold in America is little less than ground corn cobs. Concoctions sold for whole wheat sometimes contain as much as 3/4 of the stuff hogs refuse to eat. Dr. Ward and others have pointed this out after investigation. If it be true that the mind can take care of food question, why not let the mind take care of eating too? There is just one standpoint in this matter. If it is necessary to eat at all, it is necessary to eat the proper elements of food. Eating, breathing, and sleeping are natural laws. We cannot ignore a single one of these without suffering ill effects, not in this earthly life at least. Fasting increases the inflow of cosmic energy. But of the three sources of energy, sleep is the most important, and it may be readily seen that if we could eat, drink, and breathe properly, we should sleep less and still retain the needed amount of energy, and that if we slept more, we should not require the usual amount of food. And this is one of the reasons why fasting is promotive of astral projection. When the fast is in progress, one of the secondary sources of energy is cut off, and in order to retain in the system the needed amount of energy, the astral body at night is thrown further out of coincidence in order to collect a greater charge of cosmic energy to balance the loss. That is why people can undergo long fasts without losing energy, and in some cases actually increase their energy. Some may say, how is it that while taking a fast, the patient sleeps no longer yet retains enough energy to make up for the deficiency? In other words, how can the subject collect more energy while fasting through sleep than while not fasting and still sleep the same length of time? The answer is that it does not depend upon the length or duration of sleep, but upon the distance of separation of the astral and physical bodies during sleep. Remember that the astral body discoincides from the physical during sleep for the purpose of recharging, and the further out of the physical it emerges, the more easily does it condense the cosmic force. Thus, we can see the relation of fasting to astral projection. The more profound the sleep, the more inactive the body, or the more incapacitated. The greater will be the distance which the astral counterpart will move out. This is why in the hypnotic sleep, the subject can derive as much benefit in a short time as in a much longer period of natural sleep. The Orientals grasped the significance of this cosmic force long ago. They called it prana, and Swami Bhakta Vishita defines it thus: it is a subtle form of energy permeating the universe, but manifesting in a special form in the organism of the human being. This subtle force, or prana, is held to be capable of being transmitted from one organism to another, and it is held to be the energizing power by means of which many forms of occult and magic phenomena can be produced. Prana is very much akin to the human magnetism of the Western occultists, and the properties attributed to the latter are really those with the Orientals, which the Orientals for centuries past have held to be among the essential properties of prana. So at the least there is found a practical agreement here between the Oriental and the Western schools of occultism, respectively, in spite of their differing terminology. This cosmic energy has many faculties. One of these is the healing faculty. Every ill that is cured by cosmic energy. Medicine, chiropractic, Christian Science, and every other healing method depend upon the prana prana to bring about the cure. All that any curative method can do is to assist. When ailing, if you take a fast, you not only assist nature in clearing the poisons from the body, but you automatically increase the inflow of cosmic energy, the curative energy. America's foremost authority on yoga, Herbert Carrington, states in his Higher Psychical Development that the Hindus have a whole mythical system of physiology. They claim that there are certain energy carriers, or nadis, as they call them. There are 72,000 of these, and each of them has innumerable ramifications. If you take a scalpel or a knife and dissect the human body, you will not find these centers, but the Hindus say they are not composed of physical matter but of astral matter. Therefore, not having any astral senses, you cannot see them. These energy carriers are the storage centers and the chief means of circulating the prana. Again, in the same book we find doctors say we need more sleep, about 8 hours usually. If you sleep 8 hours a day, you spend a third of your life in sleep. It seems rather a waste. The Hindu said, cannot we get rid of some of this waste? Cannot we reach a state in which we no longer require sleep? By following out these exercises, the system of diet and living, which Mr. Carrington explains in detail, they were enabled to cut down their hours of sleep very much. In practice, we find that the curve of sleep runs thus. We start with what we call the threshold of consciousness. It sinks when we fall to sleep and then gradually rises again, so that immediately after you fall to sleep, you are at the deepest point, and from that point it's a gradual upward curve until you awaken. The query is it not possible to deepen that curve so that you enter into deeper sleep and require less of it? The Hindus think that they have found a method of artificially deepening sleep and not spinning it out so long, and we in the West have partially done this by means of hypnotism. All this has an important bearing upon the subject we are studying, that is astral projection. I believe that this is the first time anyone has ever put forth the claim that the astral body just coincides during sleep for the purpose of recharging, and that the depth of sleep and the amount of recuperation depend upon the distance between the astral and the physical bodies. That is, the greater the distance of separation, the freer the inflow of cosmic energy or prana into it. And does not all this show us convincingly that the weaker the individual, the more adaptable he is to extensive projection of the astral body? I assert, in spite of what other authorities maintain, that morbidity is a positive factor in projection. For my part, I cannot see what reasons can be advanced to refute this statement, although I readily admit that it's far more dangerous to attempt extensive or prolonged projections with an ill-functioning physical mechanism. Do not form the idea that I'm advising you to produce morbidity intentionally as a positive factor to projection. I am merely trying to make it plain how perfectly ridiculous is the claim that good health is a necessary factor in the art of astral projection. If this were true, that good health is necessary, the nearer one came to death, the weaker he became, the harder it would be for him to die permanently project. But common sense shows us that this is not true. Another common belief is that we burn up our energy, but what we really do is externalize our energy, that is, the neuric energy externalizes from the astral body. In the individual of nervous temperament, this exteriorization is very pronounced, and that is the reason why the individual is neurotic. I believe it was mentioned that this externalization of energy can be measured by certain instruments. If you could cut off the excessive externalization of energy in the neurotic individual, the nervous temperament would disappear. It is easily seen that persons of nervous temperament require more recharging during sleep than individuals of other temperaments. One set of bodily exercises and postures will cause the cosmic energy to externalize, while another set of exercises and postures will cause the energy to interiorize. It has been discovered that fear will fill the bloodstream with poisons almost instantly. It is claimed that for this reason a person becomes weak when in the grip of fear. I am going to tell you why fear weakens. And this is the first time anyone has made this claim. Fear externalizes the neuric energy from the astral body, automatically weakening the victim. Nothing causes externalization of nervous energy as completely and as quickly as fear. If it were true that energy is burnt up, there could be no condition of instantaneous enervation such as we have when in the grip of fear. Energy is omnipresent and indestructible. It is not created nor is it burned up. It is internalized and externalized, and it's condensed in the astral body. When projected in the astral body unconscious, one can observe this neuric energy. That is, he can see its color and condensation in the bodies of others. It is luminous like white light. It is this energy which gives the astral body its phosphorescent appearance. It is the scintillations of this condensed energy which trail along behind the phantom when the latter is moving at the intermediate speed. Although the glow of this neuric energy can be seen throughout the entire body, it is condensed mostly in the center of the body. It is very luminous in the center of the body at the solar plexus region. I have noticed this many times. Andrew Jackson Davis used to say that he always saw the nervous system in the interior of the body as though full of light. It is my belief from astral observation that the great storehouse of condensed energy in the human being is located at the solar plexus region. We have physiological indications too that this is true. I told you that fear causes instantaneous externalization of neuric energy, and true enough, we always feel the effects of fear in the solar plexus. The astral projector, when conscious, can see the neuric energy. It is interesting to know that spirits usually speak of mediums as lights. How fasting aids astral projection. Since we're speaking of energy being cosmic and not produced wholly by the foods we eat, let us recall what Christ said of food. Man does not live by bread alone. Christ was known to undergo long fasts, and there is good reason to believe that he did so in order to produce spiritual phenomena, perhaps to aid him in traveling in his spiritual body. We have learned one of the reasons why fasting tends to liberate the astral body, and to avoid any misunderstanding, we will review it. Sleep, food, and breathing are the sources of bodily energy. Sleep is the main source, for as Schopenhauer said, sleep is to the individual what winding is to the clock. Food is a secondary source of energy, and thus when a fast is undertaken, this secondary source of energy is shut off. The astral body, the condenser of energy, always discoincides from the physical during sleep for the purpose of recharging, and during a fast must take in, condense, a greater quantity of prana to make up for the deficiency caused by the fast. The further out of coincidence, the more energy the astral body gathers, the more easily it recharges itself or is recharged. Hence, during a fast, it moves out further into the stream, which means nothing more than that it projects further than the zone of quietude, normal sleep. This is but one reason why fasting is a positive factor in projection of the astral body. There is another reason, which will be discussed under suppressed desire. It has often been observed that sometimes a blow or whatnot which produces unconsciousness will cause the victim to feel more energetic after regaining consciousness. The reason is obvious. The astral body moved out some distance into the cosmic stream of energy. And here is another observation I have made. Consciousness uses up energy. Consciousness, merely being awake, uses up energy just as exertion uses it up. You can sit still or lie motionless and be conscious and use up energy. Here is something else I wish to impress upon your mind. Although the astral body recharges when it moves out of coincidence with the physical or separates from it, unconsciousness is necessary in order to reap the full benefit of the recharging. If you project the astral and retain consciousness all the time, you will not recharge the astral body. Unconsciousness is a necessary factor in conjunction with separation. I have noticed many times that after experiencing an entirely conscious projection, I felt still enervated upon recoinciding with the physical, in fact more so than upon retiring. And on the other hand, I have found that when the projection was unconscious, that is, when I merely caught myself in the act of interiorizing and therefore knew I had been projected, I always felt invigorated, sometimes even to the extent that upon awakening I actually believed I could fly off the ground. It is very common to experience a dog-tired feeling after an exteriorization that has been conscious, accompanied by a headache in the back of the head. I am convinced, for my part at least, that spirits in the lower planes must become unconscious, for consciousness uses up energy, no matter whether one be in the astral body or in the physical body. There is strong evidence to support the contention of many occultists, that is, that sleep, unconsciousness, is not brought about by a condition of the material body, but is caused by some agency outside the physical body. Such theories as cerebral hyperemia, cerebral anemia, and all other material influences must be discarded. They do not cause sleep. Neither does the withdrawal of the astral body, for even that entity sleeps and can be unconscious and projected, or conscious and projected. Chapter 8. Consciousness during astral projection. Although in the majority of cases of astral projection consciousness is chiefly a matter of chance, that is, it seems to be a chance whether or not consciousness be present, there is little doubt in my mind that schemes could be worked out or influences brought to bear which would have some effect in bringing full consciousness to the projected entity. Of course, it is possible to be conscious from the very beginning of exteriorization, but this is not usually the case. And in many projections in which I have become conscious, I have analyzed the causes which I believe aroused consciousness. Some of these causes are not unlike those which bring about consciousness, while the bodies are in coincidence. Unless consciousness be present from the very beginning of a projection, it will first begin to manifest itself in the form of a dream. It seldom comes suddenly, but slowly when the phantom is projected, a dream always preceding it, and it works itself out of the dream. If the dream corresponds to the action of the phantom, consciousness is more likely to appear. That is why dream control is such an important factor. I will now tell you of an awakening which illustrates this point. You will then see the difference between dream consciousness and real consciousness. A dreaming true experience. I was dreaming that I had entered a massive hall with a high ceiling, skylights and colored windows. It was a large room when I first entered it, but after being within it for a short time, I noticed that it has changed. It was now a small room, and there was but one small hole in the center of the ceiling through which I could see light. As I remember the dream, the room was about 12 feet square, and I stood on the floor in the center of the room, looking up through the hole in the center of the ceiling. That was the only opening through which I could escape, since the doors and windows which I had first observed had disappeared. There I stood looking up and wondering how I was ever to escape. There was no way in which I could climb up to the window, for the walls were perfectly bare, and there was nothing in the room upon which I could stand. So there I stood looking up through the hole in the center of the ceiling. It seemed that I stood there for some time, when suddenly I wondered if I could not fly through the hole. I began to rise into the air, but as I was passing through the hole, I became caught fast in it. Half my body, from my hips down, remained inside the room, and the other upper half was outside. There I was, stuck fast. I could not move either way. At this point I began to awaken and realize what was taking place. I found myself projected. Yes, it was the same old story, awakening from a dream and finding myself exteriorized. But the interesting thing was that the position of the body, astral, corresponded with the position it held in the dream. I was just halfway through the ceiling of the room when I became conscious. That is, I had moved upward directly over the shell, had uprighted, and was half above and half below the ceiling on awakening. This is merely one of the many awakenings I have experienced when emerging from a dream, And I have noticed every time that when the dream corresponds to the action of the astral body, real consciousness generally appears. When the dream corresponds to the action of the astral body, it will always cause that body to exteriorize. Awakened in the astral by a noise. Here is another example in which noise participated. Before retiring one evening, I had been reading of an Indian massacre. The leader of the band of Indians was named Little Priest. After going to sleep, I began to dream. I was in a clearing in the wilderness. The clearing was quite large, about 60 feet square. I had a gun with me, and as I was passing through the clearing in the wilderness, I suddenly saw Indians poking their heads through the trees and underbrush all around me. I raised my gun and began to fire at them, first at one and then at another. It was one continual bang, bang, bang. It seemed that the gun I was using made a very loud noise, unusually loud, making me tremble every time I discharged it. Yet I could not stop shooting, or the Indians would get me, but that awful bang, 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 how it went through me. Next, I saw the chief of the Indians. It was a Little Priest, and he was coming through the clearing toward me to kill and scalp me, I feared. So I turned the gun toward him and fired, bang, bang, bang. But I could not seem to hit him, and he was getting nearer and nearer. As he approached me, I dropped the gun and began to cringe back, but the bang, bang, bang continued. It was growing more distinct. I was forgetting about the Indian chief. I was conscious. It was a windy night, and the screen door outside was slamming back and forth in the wind. Bang, bang, bang. I found, when conscious, that I was projected in the astral and standing near my shotgun behind the door of the kitchen. But that was not all. There stood an Indian spirit, and he said, "You called Little Priest?" These are but two examples of how one becomes conscious when projected in the astral body. I could cite many, many more, but that would take a book as large as this one. Considering only the last case, had I been within cord activity range when this banging and fearful Indian fighting commenced, an interiorization would have resulted because of the emotion. You can readily see how consciousness is faintly functioning in a dream, and that it's but a step from a dream to complete awakening. The dream world. There is a dream world. When you're dreaming, you're not really in the same world as when you are conscious in the physical, although the two worlds merge into one another. While dreaming, you really are in the astral plane, and usually your astral body is in the zone of quietude. The distance of separation has nothing to do with it. Once detached, whether slightly or remotely, you are in the astral plane. Perhaps this is the first time you have ever realized that you enter the astral world every time you go to sleep, and this coincide. The fact that you stay in the zone of quietude does not make you any the less in the astral world. When out of coincidence, you're attuned with or in harmony or vibration with both astral and physical worlds, you can be conscious, partially conscious, or unconscious, either within or out of coincidence. In a dream, you are partially conscious and can be discoincided. Your mind is thus a receiving station to the vibratory waves, ether waves, carrying with them thoughts, sounds, influences, music, voices, and whatnot of two worlds. And it's through the reception of these impressions that many dreams are instigated when you fall or really rise to sleep. If the conscious mind be locked up partially, it functions in conjunction with the subconscious, and the material for dreams is obtained from the thoughts, noises, etc. of two worlds. If the conscious mind be locked up tightly, you do not dream, or I should say you do not remember having dreamt on awakening. When you're asleep, your vibration reception ability is greater than when you are physically awake. When sleeping, you are not unlike a medium, but being unconscious, you do not realize it. If partially conscious, you're open to the vibrations of the two worlds. If you awaken from a dream in the physical body, your vibration reception ability is attuned to the physical plane, and if you awaken from a dream while projected in the astral body, your vibration reception ability covers both astral and physical planes. The dream state lies between complete consciousness and complete unconsciousness. So you can see that once projected and dreaming, it's but a step into complete consciousness. The astral body has well been termed the dream body, for it is in that body that we dream, even though we may be in coincidence or but a fraction of an inch out of coincidence, or completely separated from the physical. Instigation of dreams cannot be credited to any single cause. The influences which bring them about are so numerous, cryptic, and subtle that it's doubtful whether we shall ever understand the true significance of nocturnal fantasy, but we can, by using the knowledge we have gleaned, use dreams to promote astral projection. Concerning dreams, there is one rule which we must remember. When the action of self in the dream corresponds to the action of the astral phantom, the dream will cause the phantom actually to exteriorize. The skeptic may say, how do you know that if the action of the self in the dream corresponds to the action of the phantom while projecting, it will cause projection? There is but one answer. Experience proves it. Although it takes the reader but a couple of seconds to read that rule, it took the writer several years to discover and prove the rule to be true. Now, accepting this as true, all that is necessary to do is to be able to dream true, which can be done keeping in mind the route which the phantom takes and molding the dream in accordance with it. Naturally, the dream must be of an aviation type. You can dream true, but unless you understand the route taken by the phantom and apply it to the dream, the dream, will have no pulling out effect upon the astral body. It is only reasonable to suppose that a properly applied dream should do this. The mind is partially conscious during a dream, and the dream acts as a suggestion to the subconscious will, the power which actually moves the etheric counterpart. Recall the fundamental law of projection. When the subconscious will becomes possessed of the idea to move the body, coinciding bodies, and the physical body is incapacitated, the astral body will move out of the physical. It is the dream proper which gives the subconscious will the suggestion to move the body, and the physical is incapacitated, the astral being in the zone of quietude, so that the astral body is pulled out by the dream, which must be of an aviation type. The proper dream suggestion is as certain to project the astral body as a conscious suggestion to walk will start you walking subconsciously when physically awake. It is the same subconscious will which moves the body or bodies as the case may be. If you ask me which is the most pleasant way to promote astral projection, I should answer by saying dream control. There are several methods of promoting this seeming miracle, but every method must rest upon the same fundamental law, and assuming that some would like to attempt projection by means of dream control, I shall now give the instructions for doing so. Later, I shall go into other methods. My advice here, however, is that the reader does not attempt any method until first studying the entire contents of the book. The dream control method of projection. For several nights after you retire, several weeks would be better. Watch yourself during the process of going to sleep. Try to concentrate your thoughts within yourself. Think of nothing and no one but yourself. Try to keep a close watch upon yourself as your consciousness grows dim. Try to remember that you're awake but still going to sleep. You will catch the significance of it when you try it, far more than you do now while reading it. After you have learned to hold consciousness well up into the hypnagogic state, until you actually are enveloped in sleep, then you must go a step further and construct a proper dream to hold in mind while going to sleep. Remember, the dream must be constructed so that you are going to be active in it. And further, it must be constructed so that the action you go through will correspond to the route taken by the phantom when projected. What would you like to do? Swim, ride in an airplane, go up in a balloon, a Ferris wheel, an elevator? Be sure and do in your dream the thing you like to do. If you select something you do not like, the sensation will interiorize you, for it will be unpleasant. Do that which will give you a sensation which you like. And if you become fully conscious, once you're projected, you will like the sensation, which you will actually get from the phantom floating in the air. This will go a long way toward ultimate success, to have the action in the dream of such a nature that you enjoy the sensation. Now let us suppose that you enjoy going up in an elevator. This is the formula I use. You have already learned to hold consciousness up the time you go to sleep. Lie upon your back. Think within yourself. You are lying upon your back on the floor of an elevator. You are going to lie there quietly and go to sleep. And as you enter the sleep, elevator is going to move upward. And you're going to enjoy the sensation of going up as you lie upon your back on the floor of the elevator. Now it's trembling a little, getting ready to go up to the top story of a large building. Slowly, quietly, it's going up, going up. You are conscious that you are moving upward. You're enjoying the sensation to the utmost. It is nearing the top story now. It has stopped. You're going to rise to your feet and walk out of the elevator and round the floor of the upper story of the building. You're going to look all about you as you walk round, observing everything. Now you're going to walk back into the elevator and lie down upon your back on the floor. Slowly you're moving downward, slowly downward, and you're lying on your back on the floor of the elevator on the ground floor of the building. I have stated that this was the dream I constructed for the purpose of inducing the astral body to emerge from the physical. Now it's important to use the same dream over and over again, for if you try first one dream and then another, the subconscious will not be impressed with the construction of the dream as strongly as if you repeat the same one over and over each night as you're entering sleep. Have the dream vividly worked out in your mind and hold it before you as your consciousness is slowly diminishing. Shift yourself right into the elevator just as the moment of unknowingness comes to you, and the astral body will move upward in the elevator. It will upright itself above the shell, just as you dream of standing up when the elevator reaches the top floor. It will move upward just as you dream you are walking out of the elevator. Likewise, on the return, as you walk into the elevator, the astral will move to a position directly over the shell. As you lie down, the astral will resume the horizontal position. As the elevator lowers itself, the astral body will lower itself also. The dream is a suggestion to your subconscious will, and that will acts accordingly. You should be able to remember the dream after awakening. Another advantage of this method is that the astral cable does not annoy one, as it does when a projection is induced by other methods. If one can project oneself by dream control and move some distance away, and then become conscious, one should never know that cord activity range exists. The big problem lies in gaining consciousness when one once is projected. Remember that the dream consciousness is not the true consciousness, although you can remember the dream. Now, it's not necessary to employ the dream I have mentioned. You can construct your own dream, making it appropriate in every respect, in action and sensation. Perhaps you think that you can dream this sort of dream, and that the astral body will not do as I have stated. Don't deceive yourself, it will, even though you are not clearly conscious. When I first experimented along this line, I found that repercussion of the body would take place at times, but that was always because I had dreamt that the elevator descended too quickly. I found also that I could produce repercussion of the astral body at will merely by imagining myself falling from a high building as I entered sleep. I would hold this thought in mind that I was falling from a high building, and soon after going to sleep I would repercuss All you need to do to convince yourself that these things I'm telling you are true is to follow the instructions and find out for yourself. If you like to swim, of course, you must plot the dream so that as you are in the water, the water must rise, bearing you upward. Then, when you have been raised to a position when the water floods its banks, you swim outward. This follows the action which the phantom takes in projection. Many, no doubt, will say that they could never project their astral body into space, that they could never disconnect one body from the other, yet every time one goes to sleep, the astral counterpart moves out of the physical to some extent. Every time you have a falling dream, your astral body has been projected and is returning as you dream of the fall. But the big problem is, I repeat again, how can one project and possess true consciousness while projected? I have said that consciousness is more or less a matter of chance, and I have tried a few experiments in which I succeeded in bringing about consciousness which I do not think would have appeared on these particular occasions, but for the factor which I then introduced. I shall discuss this matter shortly. However, now that we are on this subject of dream control, a few more suggestions for dream plots will not be amiss. The main action, of course, is the upward movement in getting the phantom out. So even though the sideway action is not equally realistic, always have the upward movement of self vividly pictured in the mind, and if possible with the body in the dream lying in a horizontal position as it moves upward. Plan your dream as you would plan an important matter in daily life. The mere fact that it's but a dream does not lessen its significance in moving the phantom. Here are a few suggestions for dream plots, some of which I have taken from Dr. Carrington's Higher Psychical Development. See a mental image of yourself in a mirror, your own picture. Construct, as it were, or imagine a mirror about 20 feet behind you in space, and picture yourself walking backwards into that mirror. Another exercise is to endeavor to lift yourself out of your body to a point about 18 inches above your own head, like Baron Munchausen lifting himself by his own bootstraps. Imagine that you are steaming out of the body, coming out of all the pores. Now this steam is collecting just above you and is forming a replica of yourself and is then carried upward on the air. Climbing a ladder is another good exercise to construct mentally, likewise climbing a rope. The writer has had many projections which were brought about by dreams of climbing a ladder. Another, and a very good one, for it corresponds closely to the action of the phantom while exteriorizing, is to imagine a tank gradually filling with water, on the top of which one floats. The object is to find a small hole in one side of the tank through which one passes out. However, if the subject has a great fear of water, such an exercise is not advisable. On the other hand, for one who likes water, bathing, swimming, floating, a better exercise could hardly be constructed, for the action of the self is correct and the sensation would be pleasant. Another is to imagine oneself whirling. Whirling objects are much used in development work. The dervishes and other Orientals resort to whirling exercises, which doubtless have this fundamental object of loosening the astral body from the physical and in inducing ecstatic states of consciousness as the result. You will recall what I told you formerly, that is, that dizziness is merely a condition of looseness of the astral counterpart. Epileptics usually begin to whirl just as a spell is coming on, often making several complete revolutions of the body before catalepsy begins. The image of a revolving star is used to stimulate the activity of the astral body. Concentration upon the image of a whirlpool. The sense of expanding and contracting the body is very useful, as is that of being carried along on the surface of a wave. One very useful exercise is the image of a cone. The image of a cone in one form or another is quite common in development work because it involves the idea of contracting to a point or expanding from a point. thus passing through a water spout or an hourglass-shaped space is an image used. Construct a cone of circles, becoming smaller and larger, and turning such a cone inside out, or making a revolving disc assume the form of a cone and flatten out again into a disc is another. Holding the image in mind of a flame of fire and endeavoring to identify yourself with the flame is another very useful mental image to stimulate the activity of the astral body. If you could really see an astral body while projected, it would appear like a white flame holding the human shape and dimensions. A good exercise for this purpose is to close the eyes, then roll the eyeballs until they are fixed at a point on the forehead between the eyes, in much the same way as the yogis do, and make a concentrated effort to gather together your psychic energies at that point. Well, with the whole force of your being, that you are there, and when you have concentrated your full self at the spot, then that you shall be projected outwards in space from that point of departure. This method is a strain upon the eyes, but is one which has been found very effective as the result of numerous experiments and experiences. Here is a very effective developing exercise. Lean back in an armchair in such a manner that you can look directly into a mirror, a real mirror, which is about 4 feet in front of you. Relax, rest in peace, think only of yourself. Now try to go to sleep, watching through partly closed eyes the image of yourself in the mirror. Continuing, you will eventually become drowsy and your head will begin to nod. But just keep watching the image in the mirror. This is an almost automatic way of developing, for as the astral tries to withdraw, your head tends to fall. If the astral does withdraw, the head will drop. Thus, you see, the state you are trying to attain consciously is more impressive. For the instant you are about to rise to sleep, your head begins to fall, which at once arouses you slightly. The next step is to imagine that you are floating out of the chair into the air of the room. Just as you are in this condition, the condition in which your head wishes to fall, in which you are really going to sleep, in which the astral body is really moving slightly out. You have doubtless noticed that the instant a person falls, rises to sleep, the physical body seems to collapse slightly, and that if there be any member of the physical body which is not resting upon something solid, it will fall. Also, that this has the effect of slightly reviving the subject. Now, this principle can be employed in order to stimulate consciousness as the astral body is trying to withdraw, for it's the withdrawing of the astral which brings about the relaxation. You may have observed that this principle was employed in the last exercise given. It can be employed likewise while going to sleep in the horizontal position. It is interesting to try this and note the consequences. After retiring, hold your dream construction before you and at the same time hold one arm in the air so that it will fall when you go to sleep. Now, as you enter the hypnagogic state, the arm will begin to sway, to fall, and this will slightly awaken you, for you must not let it fall. In this way, you force consciousness further into the hypnagogic state. It is not at all unusual when trying this exercise for the subject to feel breathless in the region of the stomach just when the arm is falling, and he will jump slightly to stop it. This slight jump is nothing less than slight repercussion of body. Even subjects most unadaptable to projection can experience what I have just described, can actually feel the astral moving by following this formula. This is a good exercise to practice, for in order to dream true, you must be able to hold consciousness up to the very moment when you rise to sleep. It is true that some people never have a consciousness of going to sleep. In fact, most people do not. But until the subject can experience the consciousness of going to sleep, he will never be able to dream true. It is not as difficult to cause the projection of the astral body by the dream control method as you might think. Once the etheric begins to rise, the dream impresses the action of the dream body, and the action of that body impresses the dream. This may be a little difficult to comprehend, but it's true. The whole trick lies in the proper start, in the proper condition of the mind at the takeoff. You do not have to start the body. It will start itself as you enter sleep. But you must get into the dream and keep the body moving onward. The astral naturally moves out of coincidence at the moment of sleep. It naturally starts itself. And that is just the moment when you must mentally project yourself into the upgoing elevator or whatever the dream may be, and keep going. The dream body, of course, is nothing more nor less than the astral body in a partially conscious condition. In such a dream, the astral body acts out exactly whatever the dream may be. A properly constructed dream is as sure to move the astral body out as the dream of falling is to move it in. The queer thing about this type of dream phenomenon is that you dream what is actually happening, so far as the action and sensation in the astral body are concerned. It is natural for the inexperienced investigator to say that the dream might begin by holding true to the plot and then divert from it, but it never will. The dream holds the astral activity true, and being a reality, the dream is true. If you become completely conscious in such a dream, you would usually find yourself in some place corresponding to the place of action which was last seen in the dream. That is, if you used the elevator dream, for example, and became conscious just as you were uprighting yourself at the top story, you would find yourself in the astral body uprighted directly over the shell. I care not how nonsensical this may seem to anyone. It is the truth, and I have found it to work out time after time. It is a pleasant and certain way of projecting the astral body into space. Summary of the dream control method. I shall now sum up this method of projection of the astral body through dream control. First, develop yourself so that you're enabled to hold consciousness up to the very moment of rising to sleep. The best way to do this is to hold some member of the physical body in such a position that it will not be at rest, but will be inclined to fall as you enter sleep. See exercise given in the foregoing. Second, construct a dream which will have the action of self predominant. The dream must be of the aviation type, in which you move upward and outward, corresponding to the action of the astral body while projecting. It must be a dream of something which you enjoy doing. Third, hold the dream clearly in mind. Visualize it as you are rising to sleep. Project yourself right into it and go on dreaming. In the dream, the elevator or whatnot begins to move upward coincidentally with the projection of the astral. That is, you imagine that you are starting upward the very moment you rise to sleep. That is the bare formula for inducing projection of the astral body by means of dream control, and every part of it must be strictly adhered to. It is no idle fantasy, but a tried and proven method. Of course, as you learn of other methods, you can naturally weave other promotive factors into this scheme of procedure. You will find that if before retiring you read a story or article which is fascinating to you, which holds you in suspense, a story of men who work at great heights, a story of daring aviators, such as birds' flight to the North Pole, you will strengthen your efforts to project by the dream method. The very night after I took my first airplane trip, I experienced a dream of it, and awakening from that dream, I found myself projected. Inquiring of others who have likewise experienced their first trip, I found that most of them had an aviation-type dream shortly afterward, and that several were falling dreams with repercussions. So you see that an impressive activity along the lines of your plotted dream during the day, even though it be but the reading of a thrilling aviation story, will bring forth positive results by night. If by following this formula you have a dream, you will remember it, and you can depend upon it that the astral body, the dream body, participated. However, do not mistake dream consciousness for real consciousness. Now the next and probably the most difficult step is to bring that dream body to real consciousness after it has been projected, and preferably outside cord activity range. A partially conscious projection is a step in advance of unconscious projection, and conscious projection is still a step in advance of a projection which is partially conscious. Either the phantom will awaken by chance, the reason for the awakening being unknown, or else some means must be devised by which you bring true consciousness about. So far as I know, there are but two influences which will serve to awaken the projected phantom, other than the natural awakening. These are sounds and properly applied suggestion prior to the projection. The latter is by far the more successful, and the former, that is sounds, will work only when the phantom has advanced outside cord activity range. Inside that range, they, sounds, will have the opposite effect and interiorize the phantom. It will be found that the more one projects, the more liable consciousness is to intervene of its own accord. I have noticed also that the place at which consciousness appears once will be the place at which it will intervene again if the phantom happens to cross that spot while somnambulistic in the astral. Why this should be, I do not know. However, I have a theory. Have you ever traveled, say, along a road in an automobile and at a certain place thought of a certain thing, and even weeks later, have you ever traveled over the same route and at the same spot thought of the same thing which you had in mind when on that spot formerly? Of course you have, and as you recall it, it seems to you that the locale, the spot, suggested the same things to you that you had in mind when on that spot before, even though these objects sustain no relation whatever to what you have now in mind. For instance, every time I pass a turn in the road about a mile from where I live, I think of a circus. Just why, I do not know, yet every single time I pass that turn, I visualize a circus. Now, that is just what happens in the astral. If you are somnambulating, and I might say that the astral body has a habit of following the same course time after time, although it does take other courses, and you become conscious at a certain place, you will find that if you ever cross that spot again in the astral body, you will again become conscious there. There are many people who are out in the astral body somnambulating every night, but they do not know it. I wager that the world would be greatly surprised if it knew how common unconscious and partially conscious astral projection really is. Now, as the astral body moves forward, if it is in a dream state, the environment along its pathway will influence the dream. Those dreams which are vivid, in which we seem very active, dreams that we have dreamt over and over again, may be and usually are astral somnambulistic dreams. Now, sometimes during such a dream, the route is not misconstructed very much in the memory, and during the waking hours, should we happen to pass over the same route or a similar one, which the phantom was traversing during the dream, we should recall the dream. But this is not all. The next time we have the dream, we know that it is a dream, and thus we dream that we are dreaming. Now, this may seem difficult to understand, but that is the way it works. It's a strange phenomenon, this dreaming experience. Let us now still go further. What dreams do you have over and over again in which you take an active part? Do you ever dream that you are dreaming? If so, what is the dream about? Can you find a locale in your waking hours which will induce you to recall the dream? That is, where are you in the physical body when you suddenly think of having been in a similar place in your dream? These are the things which you must notice. If you can harmonize these conditions, try to act out the dream in your physical body. Go over the route while thinking of the dream, and as you're doing so, tell yourself that the next time you dream of reaching the spot, you're going to awaken at this tree, in this doorway, etc. The dream may recur again soon spontaneously, or by thinking about it as you enter sleep, you may produce it intentionally. If the dream actually were an astral somnambulistic dream, The suggestion that you will awaken at the given spot as you reach it in the astral body will be one of the strongest possible factors toward restoring complete astral body consciousness. The suggestion is not unlike the suggestion given to the subject in the hypnotic state to awaken. The operator says, "I will count 5, then you will awaken." Or, "Now walk straight ahead, and when you get to that door, you will awaken." The dream gives the suggestion to the mind of the astral somnambulist who is in the dream state. If you have located the spot or a similar one where you were in the dream and go over this route in your physical body exactly as you recall the dream, and then tell yourself that when you get to this tree, this door, or whatnot in the dream, you will awaken, this suggestion will be fulfilled as you walk up the door, tree, etc. in the dream body. This is the most certain way of bringing consciousness to the projected phantom, even though it does involve a study of your dreams. Of course, when you can produce an aviation type of dream and remember it, the thing to do is to suggest to yourself just before going to sleep that you will awaken at a certain place. Footnote: I have a friend to whom I gave these instructions. He was quite successful in producing the proper dream, but when the suggestion to awaken should come forth, he would dream that he was dreaming, and dream that he could not awaken. SM. End of footnote. Take, for example, the elevator dream. Tell yourself that after you have been lifted to the top floor of the building and have left the elevator and walked away from it, that you will then awaken. This is a simpler method, but not as effective as the complicated dream study method just given. Always use good judgment in suggesting the spot where you wish to awaken, making sure it is not too near the physical body, or you might awaken within cord activity range, which is to be avoided if possible. Let us suppose for a moment that you sleep on the lower floor of your home or on any floor, so long as there are other floors above you. You have planned an elevator dream in which you will be carried upward. Will upright yourself, walk out of the elevator, and walk around on the upper floor of the building. A good thing to know is the setting, the way in which things really are arranged on the floor above you, and mold your dream accordingly. Find one object on the floor above you, a door, a window, something that will be in your path in the dream, and as you're holding the dream construction before you on going to sleep, suggest to yourself that you will awaken when you reach that object. In this way, when you approach it in the dream body, the suggestion will be fulfilled. The suggestion that you will become conscious upon reaching a certain place in your astral body will always be more effective than merely the suggestion that you will become conscious somewhere in the astral body. Suggestion of place works in the same way in the astral as time does in the physical. Perhaps you have tried suggestion to replace the alarm clock, and by suggesting upon retiring that you will awaken at a certain hour, you have been enabled to do so. This is the way in which place affects the astral body. Simply will that you will awaken at a certain place in the astral body, just as you will to awaken at a certain time in the physical body. Although the proper kind of dream, the aviation type, will seldom fail to pull out the dream body in practically all cases, the nervous, temperamental person is so susceptible that he will often be projected spontaneously while asleep. And while one temperament can have a dream, not necessarily of the aviation type but just an ordinary dream, in which his dream body does not move out of the zone of quietude, the nervous type might have a similar dream, and his dream body would move out and enact the dream. In other words, while the aviation type of dream will usually pull out the dream body with all types of people, even an ordinary dream will often project the dream body in the nervous type. When this occurs, one can never tell what the phantom will do, but its action will always be found to sustain some relation to the dream. The phantom may be projected to the very locale which the subject is dreaming about. If the locale is a product of the imagination in the dream, the phantom may find a locale that is similar to the one which the mind created. The phantom may linger about objects which are similar to the objects seen in the dream. As an example of this, recall the dream I had in which I was shooting Indians, and becoming fully conscious in the dream body, I found myself standing near the spot where my shotgun stood. You may dream of a lake or even of the ocean hundreds of miles away, and if the dream body moves out to participate, it may be projected to the ocean, or it may only project to the pond just across the street where you're asleep.